Chapter 2060. Messing with the Palace? Seeing these words, Song Qingshu's face almost turned green. If he had really done something with the concubines in the palace and enjoyed the pleasures of women, then it would have been fine. But he hadn't even taken off his pants, and now he was being made a scapegoat? Song Qingshu looked at the inscription on the memorial, Jean Daxiu. He had an impression of this person. His name was too elegant. This person was the secretary of the directorate of the academy and was now the crown prince's teacher. The other memorial accused him of a similar crime. It was inscribed by Wei Liaoweng, who is now a martial scholar of the Imperial College and also the crown prince's teacher. However, Jean Daxiu taught the crown prince science, while Wei Liaoweng taught the crown prince archery and military strategy. It looks like this is the crown prince's intention. Song Qingshu frowned inwardly. This crown prince's methods were not very clever. He had sent his teacher directly into battle. This way, everyone would know he was the mastermind. In reality, he did not have any ill feelings towards his crown prince. Previously, because of the matter with Shen Bijuan, he had felt pity for him. As for after Shen Bijuan's incident, he immediately began to plot to marry someone else. This matter could not be blamed on him. Born of the royal family, he naturally could not allow an innocent woman to marry into his family. But now that the other party had come knocking, it was destined that the two of them could not be friends. Sometimes the world was like this. Even though they clearly admired each other, they had no choice but to be enemies. Song Qingshu couldn't help but think of Wei Xiaobao from back then. Once again, he sighed with emotion. Sighing was just sighing, but the trouble in front of him still had to be dealt with. Looking at the officials not far away, who had mocking expressions and were clearly waiting to see a joke, Song Qingshu coughed lightly and could only explain. After the emperor experienced this rebellion, he was very worried about the guard around him and ordered me to stay by his side. Of course, I also knew what was important. After nightfall, I did not stay in the palace, but rested by the side of the Qing Palace. The imperial palace was not just a place where the emperor's concubines resided. It was divided into the inner court and the outer court. After entering the imperial palace, heading east, passing through a northern corridor, was the Privy Council, followed by the Secretariat, and then the Datang, which was also known as the Political Affairs Hall, where the Prime Minister retreated from court. Then there was the Minxiao Province, and finally there was the Hall of Qing, which is also known as the Hall of Golden Throne in the eyes of the common people. These places all belong to the outer court. With permission, officials could enter and exit. They had to walk all the way inside, past a wall and the palace gate, before reaching the inner court. That was the private place of the emperor and his concubines, and no other men were allowed to enter. In the past, when Song Qingshu had gone to find Li Yuanji and Ah Ku, he had entered the inner court, but he had used his peerless Qing Gong to sneak in at night. If he had entered in broad daylight, the effect would have been too bad. Thus, he had been on guard from the beginning. However, he had not expected that someone would still make a fuss about it. Ever since Taizu, it's not like there weren't any ministers who stayed at the Political Affairs Hall because they were busy with official business. However, there's only one who stayed here every day like King Qi. At this time, an old man stood up. He was the crown prince's grand tutor, Jean Daxiu. Song Qingshu was secretly annoyed. He could not help but say, "I only stayed here for a day. How could I have stayed here every day?" Jean Daxiu immediately said, "King Qi means that you will move out of the palace today?" Song Qingshu was startled. He did not expect that he would fall into a trap. However, he had the card of Zhao Go in his hand, so he did not panic. "The safety of the emperor now requires me to look after him at all times. He even specially ordered me to stay by his side. How could I care about my own reputation and not care about the safety of the emperor?" "That's not true," Jean Daxiu immediately retorted. "Since ancient times, the emperor has had his own guards and personal guards. Why would King Qi need to interfere?" Song Qingshu's expression changed. He suddenly stood up. The aura of a great grandmaster exploded. The entire hall was enveloped by his aura. Everyone's expression changed. Even breathing became difficult. "Sir Jean is a scholar. I fear that you do not know the concept of a true martial arts master. This time, there were almost 10 great grandmasters in the Wu-Dang Mountain incident. Even the Imperial Guards were like chickens and dogs in front of them. This time, the Imperial Guards that accompanied me were almost completely annihilated. Song Qingshu snorted coldly. In the past, there were two great grandmasters, Huang Shang and Do Jiusong, guarding the palace. That was how the peace of the palace was ensured. Now that the two of them are gone, the palace is defenseless against a great grandmaster. If I am not in the palace, and someone with ulterior motives invites a great grandmaster, wouldn't that be playing with the lives of the emperor and the safety of the country? He quickly retracted his aura. It should be known that this group of officials were all weak scholars. Many of them had old arms and legs. If they were accidentally injured by him, there would be a lot of trouble. Zhen Dexiu's expression alternated between green and white. He opened his mouth and wanted to refute. Unfortunately, he was intimidated by the other's aura and could not catch his breath for a while. Song Qingshu's control of his strength was very accurate. He could not speak, but did not really injure him. The King of Qi's words are indeed reasonable. However, Huang Chang and the wine-fighting monk are seniors of virtue and prestige. Moreover, they are old and no one would think in that direction. The King of Qi is different. The one who spoke was Wei Liaoing. He was responsible for teaching the crown prince martial arts. Obviously, he had extraordinary skills. Naturally, he recovered faster than Zhen Dexiu. The King of Qi is in the prime of his youth. There are so many beauties in the palace. Moreover, those imperial concubines are all carefully selected beauties from all over the country. He wanted to say something, but stopped. However, everyone present was a man. Each and every one of them revealed a knowing smile. Regardless of whether they were palace maids or imperial concubines, they were all extremely lonely in the depths of the palace. Even if Song Qingshu did not take the initiative to look for them, when they saw such a young, handsome, and high-ranking man, it was hard to guarantee that they would not take the initiative to approach him. With Wei Liaoing's help, Zhen Dexiu also managed to catch her breath. She added, "Moreover, according to what I know, the King of Qi has many romantic affairs in Jianghu. He's a famous playboy." Song Qingshu secretly furrowed his brows. The affairs that he had with his female friends a few years ago still had some negative effects on him. At this time, some of the other officials also began to chime in. Those of us who are in the know naturally know that the King of Qi is upright and upright. However, those common people do not know this. They only know that the King of Qi spends his days in the imperial palace. How would they know the difference between the inner court and the outer court? In addition to the rumors that have been circulating about the King of Qi, they will definitely let their imaginations run wild. When the time comes, all of them will add oil and vinegar to the rumors. In just a few days, the rumors will become unbearable to listen to. We also know that the King of Qi is doing this for the safety of the emperor's family. However, if we do this, the imperial family will lose face. The emperor will probably not be willing to see such a situation. Why don't we report this to the emperor and let him make a decision? In this old subject's opinion, we can find a house near the imperial palace and gift it to the King of Qi to live in. This way, the King of Qi can protect the safety of the emperor's family and also shut the mouths of the ignorant. As the officials spoke one after another, the atmosphere became more and more heated. Seeing that Song Qingshu was about to be drowned by the spittle of the officials, Shen Yuan and Xue Ji, who had been silent all this time, exchanged glances. They both saw the smugness on each other's faces. Chapter 2061. Song Qingshu looked on coldly. He knew that the current situation was the result of the cooperation of the various factions in the court. The other party had come prepared, so there was no point in him holding on. Therefore, he cut the Gordian knot and said, "I think what you have said makes sense. Staying in the palace is indeed easy to attract criticism. How about this? I will move out today, but I cannot ignore the safety of the officials. Someone's suggestion is very good. How about this? Find a house near the palace, and I will guard there to prevent other great grandmasters or evil people from invading the palace." The officials in the hall looked at each other. They did not expect him to agree to leave the palace so quickly. After all, they had prepared a few trump cards that they had not used. However, since the other party had admitted to leaving the palace, they could not force him too much. After all, the other party's prestige and martial arts were there. Therefore, they accepted his suggestion and ordered the Imperial City Department to find a house near the palace for him to stay. Seeing the reactions of the people in the hall, Song Qingshu secretly sighed. In the past, whether it was as Kangxi or Tang Quobian, it was much easier for him to take over the court, so he was careless about this game of power. Now that he was in front of the stage, he realized how treacherous the center of power was and how murderous it was. He could use absolute force to make these people submit, but every circle had its own rules of the game. If he wanted to be like the main character in the novels he had read before, he would have to use force to break the rules. Unless he was like the Jin Kingdom and the Mongols in history, he could destroy the entire country and rebuild it. Otherwise, he would have to follow the existing rules. Although the Song dynasty was weak in history, it was only the country that was weak. Everyone had their own strength of character. Fighting against the Liao, the Jin, and the Mongols, although there were some traitors, there were more loyal and hot-blooded people. During the Jinkong Rebellion, the Central Plains was filled with volunteer armies. The brothers Zhang Shun and Zhang Gui charged to the rescue outside Xiangyang, knowing that they would die. The subjects and soldiers who jumped into the sea during the Battle of Cliff Mountain were all examples. The generous treatment of the Song dynasty had nurtured scholars for hundreds of years. Although there were many drawbacks, they had cultivated the strength of character of scholars. Zhen Dexiu, Wei Liaowang, and the others were famous Confucian scholars and had high prestige in the court. Even political enemies had to admit that they were good characters. Although the crown prince had instructed them to impeach him, it was clear that they did not approve of the act of staying overnight in the palace. Song Qingshu did not want to use force to break the backbone of the literati because of his own selfish desires. This was not good for the entire country and people. Thus, after much hesitation, he chose to temporarily give in. Of course, he was not so pedantic as to leave the palace without doing anything just to prove his noble character and unquestionable integrity. After the morning court, he returned to the palace and began to make arrangements. It was still early before dark, so he did not need to move out of the palace immediately. First, he informed Wang Ziting and strictly ordered the palace guards to not allow anyone to approach the emperor unless there was an imperial edict. Now, Wang Ziting and he were on the same boat. Naturally, he would not allow outsiders to know the emperor's true situation. As for the edict, it was actually his and Wang Ziting's intentions. Next was the Emperor Zhao Go. He used the great soul shifting technique and his unique acupoint sealing technique to keep him in a state of unconsciousness. This was just in case. After all, the palace was so big, and all the powers had extended their tentacles in. It was hard to say which of the guards, under Prince Qitong, had been bribed. This way, even if some people saw Zhao go, they would not be able to get any righteous status from him. Next were the imperial physicians, palace maids, eunuchs, and so on. They were all replaced with new people. Unfortunately, he could only do his best in these matters. After all, they were not his trusted aides. He was not sure if there would be any problems with the people he had carefully selected. The people sent by the Vulture Palace and the Golden Snake Camp were still on the way. It would probably be a few days before they arrived. He had some people in Lin, but many of the people from Prince Chi's mansion were handpicked by Ren Yingying from the Sun Moon sect. These people could dominate the underworld, but most of them were not suitable for a place like the palace. It was the same with the people from the Beggar's sect. As for the people from He Tiesho's brothel, Song Qingshu did not want another wave of trouble to come. If those virtuous gentlemen found out about their origins, there would be an uproar. Thus, during this transitional period, he could only stay by Zhao Go's side at all times to prevent any accidents. But he did not expect that someone with ulterior motives would get a hold of him and force him out of the palace. I've finally seen the horror of these professional haters. Thinking back to the situation in the morning court, Song Qingshu felt a headache. Those scholars did not use any vulgar words when they scolded people. Every sentence was quoted from the classics. Even if you were stabbed in the back, you still did not know how to refute. The reason why Song Qing-shu did not continue to refute and agreed to leave the palace so quickly was that he realized a fatal flaw. He did not have his own supporters in the imperial court. Look at the crown prince. It was his idea, but he did not say anything from the beginning to the end. There were a lot of people around him waving the flag and shouting for him. There were also the two old foxes, Shi Miyuan and Xue Ji, who were sitting on the fishing platform. If not for their secret instructions, how could the crown prince's people make such a big scene? Him personally debating with the great scholars like Zhang Daxiu had already fallen into a disadvantageous position. With his position, he should have been a judge and not a debater. As a judge, he could openly take sides. As a debater, unless he reached the level of Zhuge Liang, who could debate with the scholars, he was destined to lose from the beginning. But where could he find someone to wave the flag and shout for him in such a short time? Just as Song Qing-shu was having a headache, a guard suddenly came to report that someone from the Imperial City Department wanted to see him. Imperial City Department? Bring him in. Song Qing-shu was inwardly annoyed. The Imperial Court had just decided to have the people of the Imperial City Department be responsible for finding him a place to live near the Imperial Palace. In the end, the people of the Imperial City Department had come to his door so early. They couldn't wait to chase him away. Even a man made of clay had a temper. Moreover, Song Qing-shu was now in high position. It was fine that he had been bullied by those scholars before, but now that he was in a special agency like the Imperial City Department, and it was the territory of that old fox, Xue Ji, he naturally did not need to have any misgivings. He decided to teach the people of the Imperial City Department a lesson and let them know what it meant to be under one person and above tens of thousands, and what it meant to have the bearing of a great master. Not long after, the sound of light footsteps could be heard from outside the door. Song Qing-shu thought to himself that the reputation of the Imperial City Department was well-deserved. Any random person they found had decent qinggong. Of course, although he admired them, he had already made up his mind to give them a show of strength. After all, they were not on the same side. Despite clearly hearing the other party enter, Song Qing-shu pretended not to know, continuing to read the documents with his head lowered. He decided to hang the other party out to dry for now. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the person finally could not help but speak. Reporting to the Prince of Qi, the Imperial City Department has already prepared the residence. Prince of Qi, please take a look. If there is anything you are not satisfied with, we will promptly replace it. Song Qing-shu could not help but be startled. The other party's intentions were not unexpected, but the other party's voice was gentle and pleasant, clearly the voice of a young woman in the prime of her youth. Raising his head, he saw a young woman with red lips and white teeth. Her appearance was rich and beautiful. Although she was dressed in the austere attire of the Imperial City Department, it was still difficult to conceal her refined and dignified temperament. "Why is it you?" Song Qing-shu asked in astonishment. He had met this young woman in men's clothing several times before. It was the eldest daughter of the Xue family, Xue Baochai. Xue Baochai smiled faintly. Everyone in the Imperial City Department knows that the Prince of Qi suffered a bellyful of anger during the morning court session. If you come now, you will definitely be struck by misfortune. As a result, none of them are willing to come. After pushing and pushing, this arduous task fell to me. Unfortunately, as soon as I arrived, I received the cold shoulder of your highness. Those colleagues of yours are quite crafty. Song Qing-shu had no choice but to admit that this was a brilliant move. He had clearly decided to teach the men of the Imperial City Department a lesson to vent his anger. However, when faced with this young woman with bright eyes, coupled with the fact that she was half an acquaintance, he found it embarrassing to make a move. It seemed that beautiful women could provide unexpected lubricants in the workplace. Song Qing-shu's bellyful of anger had unknowingly dissipated by more than half. He immediately tossed his solemn vow to the back of his mind. It seemed that nothing in the world could escape the law of true fragrance. During the morning court session, all the civil and military officials accused me of messing up the harem. Among them, there was no lack of your father's trusted aides. For such a beautiful young lady to be dispatched at this time, isn't your father worried about sending a sheep into the tiger's den? Song Qing-shu deliberately put on a stern face. Shweb Baochai's complexion reddened slightly, but she quickly recovered. The Prince of Qi's confidants are all heavenly beauties. It is only natural that he would look down on a willow branch like me. Moreover, I am busy with my duties and have not thought of anything else. A willow branch like you. Song Qing-shu looked her up and down with a strange expression. He could not help but remark, "Young Lady Shue, with your willow branch like you, who in this world would dare call themselves a beauty?" Ever since Shue Baochai was a child, countless people had praised her for her beauty, but she didn't know why, but this sentence left a deep impression on her. It was probably related to the identity and status of the person who said it. However, she was a secret agent of the Imperial City Department and quickly recovered. The Prince of Qi is indeed as good as the rumors say. Originally, I did not agree with the proposals of those upright gentlemen in the court. Now, it seems that their decision was correct. Song Qing-shu's face darkened. Are you praising me or insulting me? This lowly official does not dare. Shue Baochai bowed and continued. Please, Prince of Qi, go to the residence to take a look. If you're not satisfied, I will immediately order someone to replace it. Song Qing-shu glanced at the sky outside the window and shook his head. It is still morning. Why don't we go later? If we go later, I fear that there will not be enough time. Shue Baochai had an awkward expression. There are not many residences near the imperial palace. All of them are the residences of the nobles and ministers. It is a rather troublesome matter to make room. Song Qing-shu's brow furrowed. With this kind of harassment, I fear that we have offended some ministers for no reason. Shue Baochai said, in truth, our Imperial City Department has a few residences, so we wish to invite Prince of Qi to take a look. Song Qing-shu had originally wanted to say that any residence would suffice. However, he immediately thought that if the Imperial City Department deliberately arranged a very remote place for him to stay far away from the Emperor, it would instead be troublesome. As a result, he had to personally take a look. You are in such a hurry to have me look. Could it be that you are deliberately luring me away to lure the tiger away from the mountain? Song Qing-shu looked suspiciously at the young woman in front of him. A bashful expression appeared on Shue Baochai's face. With some embarrassment, she said, the main reason is that the people of the Imperial City Department are not willing to touch bad luck. As a result, only I am responsible for this matter. I am worried that it will be too late. You know that I am a young woman. If I go in and out of private residences at night with you, it will be somewhat inconvenient. Song Qing-shu almost spat out a mouthful of blood. In the middle of the day, she had also come to view him as a pervert. Brother Song, can you help me? Shue Baochai was also embarrassed. Her large eyes widened, somewhat guiltily and somewhat beseeching. All right, let's go take a look first. Song Qing-shu reluctantly agreed. However, he was inwardly sneering. How could a woman from the Imperial City Department be a harmless little bunny? The other party's appearance was most likely 30% genuine and 70% fake. However, it would be good to take advantage of this opportunity to see what these people were up to. As for the Imperial Palace, he had long since made arrangements. It would be good to take advantage of this opportunity to see if there were any loopholes. As they were leaving, Song Qing-shu could not help but ask, in truth, I have always been very curious. Young Lady Shue, you come from a prestigious family and are a young lady of a noble family. Why would you choose to join a place like the Imperial City Department? Chapter 2062. Shue Baochai smiled slightly. It's mainly because my brother works in the Imperial City Department. When I was a child, I often went to the Imperial City Department to play with him. After a while, I became familiar with the people in the Imperial City Department. Then, it was natural for me to join the Imperial City Department. Song Qing-shu looked at her noncommittally. Since Miss Shue doesn't want to answer, then don't. Why do you make up some lies? Who asked you to be a high and mighty prince? Do you think I would dare to not answer your question? Shue Baochai rolled her eyes. It was a little cute. Then, she sighed faintly. In fact, our Shue family has only been prosperous these years. In the early years, our main identity was still royal merchants. Song Qingshu nodded. He thought that Madame Ruan was also a royal merchant. The competition between the Ruan family and the Shue family was quite fierce in the past few years. Your Highness must know the situation of the Song dynasty. No matter how much money our family makes, it is difficult to change our lowly merchant identity. Shue Baochai's tone was a little sad and self-deprecating. Everyone in the family is working hard to change all this. It is easier said than done for a merchant family to enter the official career. We have spent a lot of money. It is good enough to get a position like the Imperial City Department. How can we be picky? Song Qingshu knew that she was telling the truth. There were a lot of people in the capital waiting for the Jinshi of 2 ranks to fill the vacancy. Although there were many officials in the Song dynasty, there were very few vacancies every year. Everyone fought for them. The local positions had to be given to the Jinshi of 2 ranks first. Therefore, the Shue family could only go to places that the Jinshi were not willing to go. Of course, this was a scene from many years ago. The Shue family had Shue Ji, and with the help of the other major families, they had risen through the ranks over the years. Now that they were involved in politics, the Shue family status had naturally risen as well. You're a girl. It is too hard for you to work in such a place. Song Qingshu couldn't help thinking of Wan Yinping of the Jin Kingdom. But with her character, she was doing well in the laundry yard. Everyone in the family works hard. Shue Baochai bit her lip. I have a cousin who is far better than me in both appearance and talent. At a young age, she has to participate in the family's imperial business. She has to go out in public all day, eating and sleeping in the open. Compared to her, what is my little bit of hard work? Song Qingshu knew that the cousin she was referring to was Shue Baoqin. Of course, she was clearly being modest when she said that her looks and talents far surpassed his. Of course, although Shue Baoqin's appearance in Dream of the Red Chamber was short, she did have the feeling that she was the most beautiful woman in the world. That was why he vaguely remembered her. I've accidentally said so many trivial things. I've made a fool of myself in front of your Highness. Shue Baochai quickly woke up, and her face returned to that perfect smile from before. Song Qingshu sighed. Compared to the mask you're wearing now, I think you're cuter when you reveal your true feelings. Shue Baochai blushed. Your Highness is about to become the son-in-law. It is not good to casually flirt with other girls. Song Qingshu was speechless. He knew that she had returned to her usual state. She probably wouldn't say anything of value again. He changed the topic. Right. Why didn't I see your older brother this time? I remember that his swordsmanship is very good. Shue Baochai's expression darkened. My older brother went on a business trip a while ago. He was seriously injured and has been in seclusion ever since. Business trip? Song Qingshu inwardly sneered. Shui had gone to Liao to assassinate the diplomatic mission and had almost killed Shin Bijuan. In the end, he had been ambushed by Murong Jingwe with a divine blade slash. Even he did not dare to underestimate the power of the divine blade slash. Shui had suffered a direct hit. It was already good that he had survived. If he wanted to recover to his peak, he would not be able to do so even if he went into seclusion for a long time. The two of them chatted as they hurried along. Soon, they arrived at the place prepared by the Imperial City Department outside the palace. Song Qingshu rejected it with a glance. As he had expected, the Imperial City Department had chosen a place that was relatively far from the Imperial Palace. Shue Baochai did not seem surprised by his reaction. She quickly led him to other places. After walking through several places, Song Qingshu said with a smile that was not a smile, "Eldest Miss Shue, you have deliberately led me in circles. You should have finished what you need to do, right?" Shue Baochai's expression changed. She smiled unnaturally. What is the Prince of Qi saying? I don't understand. At this moment, an imperial bodyguard suddenly galloped over. Reporting. Song Qingshu frowned. What is it? The crown prince was assassinated in Chongqing Palace Hall. The imperial bodyguard quickly replied. What? Shue Baochai cried out in alarm. She was clearly surprised by this result. Song Qingshu's face darkened. Didn't we already order that without an official warrant, no one is allowed to enter or leave the imperial palace? Why did the crown prince appear in Chongqing Palace Hall? Chongqing Palace Hall was the residence of the most respected imperial concubines in the Great Song Imperial Palace. At present, it was Consort Jia who resided there. This subordinate does not know the specifics, the imperial bodyguard hastily replied. Let's return to the palace first. Song Qingshu waved his hand, calling for his subordinates to hurry back to the imperial palace. Seeing this, Shuep Baochai hurriedly followed. What is the matter with the assassins? Song Qingshu hastily asked. In truth, he had already guessed that someone would make a move when he left the palace. However, he did not expect that the first to jump out would be the crown prince. Moreover, he did not expect that there would be an assassin. After all, the safety of the imperial palace was now under the responsibility of him and Wang Ziding's people. If anything happened to the crown prince, they would be in big trouble. Not long after the crown prince and his entourage arrived at Chongqing Palace Hall, an assassin jumped out of nowhere and injured the crown prince with a hidden weapon. Even the Empress Dowager was shocked. The imperial bodyguard answered. How is the crown prince? Song Qingshu somewhat suspected that this assassin was deliberately sent by his political enemies. It was a good trick to injure himself to gain the confidence of the crown prince. The assassin's hidden weapon was poisoned. We have already invited the imperial physician. I don't know if he can save the crown prince. The imperial bodyguard quickly answered. Poison? This was beyond Song Qingshu's expectations. He thought that this person was probably not one of the crown prince's men. Could it be someone sent by the two old foxes, Shimi Yuan and Shueji? Not only did they get rid of the crown prince, but they also took the opportunity to frame me. Have you caught the assassin? Song Qingshu hastily asked. If they had a witness, the following situation would be much easier to deal with. The assassin's Qinggong is very good. He injured many guards. However, the palace marshal has sealed off the surroundings of the imperial palace. The assassin should not have escaped, the imperial bodyguard replied. It's good that he hasn't escaped. Song Qingshu's eyes lit up. As long as the assassin was still in the imperial palace, he would be able to find him. You guys follow behind. I will go first. After leaving these words to the entourage, he turned into a shadow and quickly ran in the direction of the imperial palace. Shuep Baochai tried to chase after him, but she stopped after just one step. She shook her head with a bitter smile. Song Qingshu returned to the imperial palace. He stood in the Qing Palace Hall and used the telepathic soul-searching technique. Which scoundrel dares to cause trouble in the imperial palace? Waves of sound spread to every corner of the imperial palace. Even many of the officials outside the imperial palace heard it. Many people in the imperial palace had not personally seen a great grandmaster in action. It was only now that they were all shocked. Was this the power of a great grandmaster? Song Qingshu quickly sensed that there was something strange in the back garden. His body moved, and he pounced in that direction. He arrived in front of a fake mountain. A black shadow was hiding inside. Seeing someone approaching, he instinctively attacked. However, when he saw the person's appearance clearly, his movements involuntarily paused for a moment. Song Qingshu did not hesitate. He slammed his palm against the Shanzhong point on the other's chest. However, the strange sensation from his palm shocked him, and he quickly withdrew most of his strength. Chapter 2063. But even so, his attack was shocking. The assassin cried out in surprise and fell behind the fake mountain. Song Qingshu did not expect the other party to not resist at all. He had just learned from the guard that the assassin was highly skilled in martial arts and that her attacks were ruthless. In addition, she had caused him unpredictable trouble. This caused a ball of anger in his heart. So when he saw the other party, his first reaction was to deal a heavy blow. But the development of the situation was somewhat unexpected. The touch from his palm and the cry of pain from the assassin all showed that the other party was a woman. Who are you? Song Qingshu came to the side of the assassin and asked in a low voice. It's me. the assassin said somewhat weakly as she pulled off the black cloth on her face, revealing a charming face. Her beautiful eyes were bright, and her rosy cheeks were flushed. She was truly a beauty. There was a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth, and it was especially eye-catching when reflected by her fair skin. Li Macho. Countless guesses flashed through Song Qingshu's mind, but he never thought that the assassin would be her. "Aren't you at Blackwood Cliff?" Back then, he had made a promise with Li Macho that she would work for him for a few years, and then he would set her free. At that time, the mission he had given her was to stay at Blackwood Cliff, in case the Sun Moon Church made any strange moves. Li Macho was about to answer when she suddenly spat out a small mouthful of blood. It was obvious that her injuries were not light. "There's an assassin." At this time, many Imperial guards ran in this direction. It was obvious that Song Qingshu's figure had guided them. "Wait a moment." Song Qingshu motioned for Li Macho to continue hiding in the fake mountain cave, and then he stood on the fake mountain and stopped the guards running in the distance. "The assassin is not here. Search elsewhere." The guards did not worry about him. They bowed and searched in other directions. After the Imperial guards left, Song Qingshu hurried to the fake mountain and found that Li Macho had fainted against a rock. Song Qingshu checked her pulse and finally let out a sigh of relief. He had held back most of his strength in that palm strike, so although Li Macho's injuries were not light, her life was not in danger. There were many guards coming and going, so Song Qingshu naturally couldn't leave her here. He stooped down and carried Li Macho to his room. Currently, the safest place in the entire Imperial Palace was probably his room. With the reputation of a great grandmaster, no one would dare to come and seek trouble. The Imperial guards would also not deliberately search his residence. On the way, Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. He felt that Li Macho's waist was extremely soft. Now that they were flying at lightning speed, her body was like a water fairy, slightly trembling in the wind. Song Qingshu was secretly puzzled. Li Macho wasn't young anymore. 10 years ago, she had made a name for herself in Jianghu. Now that 10 years had passed, how could her skin still be delicate like a young girl's? Suddenly, he laughed involuntarily. After living in this world for a long time, many standards of judgment had been led astray. Li Macho was an older girl here, but really, when she debuted, she was only around 10 years old. Now, after 10 years, she was in her 20s. In the future, she would be at her peak. On the other hand, at first, he thought that she was a rising star, but in reality, she was already over 30 years old. She was completely an old cow that ate young grass. Very quickly, Song Qingshu returned to his room and gently placed Li Macho on the bed. Feeling the vibration, Li Macho slowly woke up. Seeing that Song Qingshu seemed to be undressing, she couldn't help but be shocked. "What are you trying to do?" Song Qingshu's face darkened. "In your heart, am I such a beast? Speaking of which, you're the female devil who kills people like flies in Jianghu." As he spoke, he took out a porcelain bottle from his bosom. "I'm really sorry just now. I didn't know it was you, so I was a bit heavy-handed. This is the Xiaoyao Sex 9 turns bear snake pill. Take it and use your internal strength to open up the medicinal effect. After a few days of rest, you should be fine." Looking at the pill in his palm, Li Macho realized that she had wronged him. She said with some embarrassment, "Thank you." Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh. "This world is really strange. A female devil like you is actually guarding her chastity. If it was in my hometown, you should have seen countless people." Li Macho's face turned cold. In an instant, she took out a few soul-freezing silver needles. She said angrily, "Although I can't beat you, I'm not the kind of person that you can take liberties with." Song Qingshu reached out and took one of the soul-freezing silver needles. He couldn't help but ask, "Did you just use this needle to hurt the crown prince?" At the same time, he was secretly worried. The soul-freezing silver needles were extremely poisonous. Did the crown prince die, just like that? Li Macho's face turned pale. She didn't even have time to react. The needle in her hand had already changed hands. She knew that the gap between their martial arts was too big. She didn't want to resist anymore. She couldn't help but say dejectedly, The crown prince is a person with good martial arts. He shouldn't die. Song Qingshu was relieved. He was about to ask her why she wanted to enter the palace to assassinate the crown prince. Suddenly, his ears twitched. He heard the sound of the palace guards searching everywhere. He knew that this couldn't go on. He said to Limacho, "We'll talk about other things later. Take off your clothes first." "You." Limacho couldn't help but be furious. She didn't care whether she could beat him or not. In an instant, the soul-freezing silver needles in her hand shot out. Song Qingshu's figure flashed. Looking at the row of poisonous needles on the pillar behind him, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. "Grandaunt, you really want my life?" Limacho looked at him with a frosty face. She knew that she couldn't hit the other, so she didn't waste any more energy. "I'm really scared of you. I just wanted to play a joke with you." Song Qingshu knew that Limacho was usually ruthless, but she was very conservative in matters between men and women. He didn't tease her anymore. He explained, "You just assassinated the crown prince. It was a big deal. The palace guards immediately sealed off the entire imperial city. Knowing that you were still in the palace, they are now searching for you from house to house. To avoid trouble later, I had to pretend to be you and leave the palace." Even though she understood the cause and effect, Limacho was still somewhat angry. "The clothes I wore, how can I take them off and give them to you?" Song Qingshu spread his hands and said, "Who told you to come in wearing such an eye-catching outfit? Where am I going to find another set of night clothes?" Limacho bit her lip and turned her head to the side. "Anyway, it won't work. At worst, you can just hand over me, the assassin." Now that the situation in the imperial palace was so tense, Song Qingshu still had a lot of things to deal with. He couldn't stand her being delayed like this. He simply said, "If you don't take them off, then I'll do it myself." "You dare." Limacho instantly shrank into the corner, looking at him angrily with shame and anger. Song Qingshu said with a smile, "Anyway, in your heart, I'm also the kind of greedy and lecherous beast. What's there to be afraid of? You just gave me a good and honorable excuse. I'll take them off." Limacho's face alternated between red and white. In the end, she could only say hatefully, "You're a great grandmaster. How can you be so shameless?" Chapter 2064. Seeing Limacho unbuttoning her coat, Song Qingshu was speechless. "It's just a coat. Aren't you wearing clothes underneath? You're acting like I'm molesting you." "How is this not molesting me?" Limacho was furious, but she knew that he had a bigger fist. She was too lazy to refute him. She hid under the blanket and took off her night clothes and handed them to him. The clothes were still warm. Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh. "It smells so good. I didn't expect you to wear perfume." Limacho's face darkened. "I'm not a girl from a brothel. Why would I wear perfume? It's just your imagination. It's normal for women to wear perfume. How can you call it a brothel?" Song Qingshu said as he put on the night clothes. "You don't really think of yourself as a Taoist nun, do you?" Limacho's face turned green and red. She seemed to be enduring something. She couldn't help but say angrily, "I'm a Taoist nun. You just hurt by love and close your heart. Why do you want to ruin your life for a man?" Song Qingshu said as he put on his clothes. The black clothes were a little small for him, and he almost couldn't fit into them. He had to use the bone shrinking technique from the 9 manual to shrink his body before he could barely fit into them. "You don't have to worry about me." Limacho turned her face away, and no one could see her expression. Lu Jinyuan's matter was her sore spot, and if it was someone else who dared to talk to her about this, she would have sent them to hell long ago. It was a pity that she could not defeat Song Qingshu, and just thinking about it made her go crazy. "I'll go out and distract the guards. You stay here and rest. No one will come here to search." Song Qingshu walked a few steps and suddenly turned back. "Right? You won't run away while I'm gone, will you?" "Umph." Limacho's expression showed that she had the same intention. Song Qingshu didn't mind and said with a faint smile, "Even if you run, I can still find you. Don't forget how I located you just now. Once you escape and I catch you, I'll strip you naked and hang you on the palace gate. Let's see if you're afraid." "You." Limacho instantly sat up straight. Her agitation triggered the internal injuries in her body, causing her to cough incessantly. She didn't care much about life and death, but she cared a lot about her reputation and chastity. Even though she knew that the other party was probably trying to scare her, she didn't dare to take the risk. Seeing that she was frightened, Song Qing-shu walked out of the door. The reason why he was like this was because Li Macho had killed many innocent people in Jianghu, so there was no need to be too polite to her. But as soon as this thought came up, it was denied by himself. In the end, it was still his personality that caused mischief. When he saw a beautiful girl, he couldn't help but tease her. Everything else was just an excuse. Despising his own hypocrisy, Song Qing-shu deliberately ran in front of the palace guards with a black cloth and showed his face. As expected, the palace guards came to arrest him. He circled around a few times and felt that it was almost time. He directly escaped from the palace under the watchful eyes of the public. Then he went to a secluded corner, changed his clothes, and secretly returned to the palace. When he returned to the palace, he didn't directly return to his residence. Instead, he rushed to Chongqing Palace. It should be known that the crown prince was hit by Li Macho's soul-freezing silver needles. The soul-freezing silver needles were extremely poisonous. He didn't want the crown prince to die like this. At this time, Chongqing Palace was already a mess. The palace maids and eunuchs kept running in and out, and the imperial physicians also took turns calling. Before entering the palace, they heard the imperial physician's voice, reporting to Your Highness, the poison of the hidden weapon is very powerful. Fortunately, young Tutor Wei sealed the crown prince's acupoints in time so that the poison didn't enter the heart meridian. Otherwise, I'm afraid that even the almighty immortals couldn't save the crown prince. Jia Fei said angrily, I didn't call you here to listen to this nonsense. Tell me directly, can you cure him? This humble subject is afraid, the imperial physician replied. We will first prescribe some medicine to suppress the poison in the crown prince's body, then use acupuncture to draw out the poison in the body. However, this poison is very powerful. I'm afraid that it may not be completely drawn out. This humble subject is worried that the crown prince may have sequelae in the future. Sequelae? Another old man's voice rang out. It was obvious that he didn't want to see this result. This voice was also familiar to Song Qing-shu. It was the young tutor of the crown prince, Wei Liawing, who had impeached him in the imperial court for a long time. Actually, there's another way. That is to find someone with extremely high martial arts skills to use his inner strength to force out the poisoned blood in the crown prince's body. However, the previous trip to Wudong caused a heavy loss of martial arts masters in the capital. I'm afraid it will be difficult to find a suitable person, the imperial physician replied. The imperial preceptor, Shi Hao, is in the capital now. Quickly invite him over. Jia Fei hurriedly shouted. No, we can't find him. Wei Liawing immediately denied it. It should be known that the crown prince and Shi Miyuan didn't get along. Who knew if they would take advantage of this time to play some tricks? If something happened to the crown prince's body, the impact would be great. Let me do it. Song Qing-shu directly stepped into the room. It was as if an invisible aura had spread out. The previously noisy room instantly quietened down. With King Qi's martial arts skills, there is naturally no problem. The imperial physician wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. In fact, he had long wanted to invite King Qi over. However, imperial physicians like them had infiltrated the imperial palace and naturally knew that both the crown prince's faction and Jia Fei's faction had conflicts with King Qi. Previously, he didn't dare to bring up the matter and cause trouble. Now that the other party had personally arrived, he could finally shift the blame. Song Qing-shu, you are in charge of the imperial palace's guards. Now that there was an assassin and the crown prince was injured, do you know your crime? Jia Fei immediately reprimanded him the moment she saw him. In fact, both of them used to drink at the same table in the Jia residence. Moreover, Song Qing-shu was the nominal teacher of the Jia residence's young masters and mistresses. Both of them could still maintain a superficial harmony. However, during this trip to Mount Wudong, How could Jia Fei not know of her younger brother's plan? Now that her younger brother had failed and died, she blamed everything on Song Qing-shu and completely shed all pretense of cordiality. Song Qing-shu's face darkened. Your ladyship's words don't make sense. During the morning assembly today, I was forced to leave the palace by the officials. Just now, it was also the people of the Imperial City Department who brought me out of the palace to look at my new residence. The assassin didn't come late or early, but at this time, the timing is so coincidental. I am thinking if someone did it on purpose. Jia Fei angrily said, What do you mean? Nothing. I am just curious who summoned the crown prince into the palace and the location of the assassination so coincidentally at Chongqing Palace Hall. Song Qing-shu said as he observed Wei Liaoing's reaction. As expected, Wei Liaoing subconsciously glanced at Jia Fei, his eyes filled with bewilderment. Feeling the suspicion of her potential ally, Jia Fei was so angry that her eyes darkened. Bastard, don't you dare smear my name. Song Qing-shu lightly said, I am here to save the crown prince. Your ladyship, you are deliberately blocking me and arguing with me. If there is a delay, Wei Liaoing's expression changed as expected. He stepped forward and said, Your ladyship, saving the crown prince is more important. We can discuss other matters later. Jia Fei's breathing quickened. She knew that Wei Liaoing no longer trusted her, and hurriedly explained, I did not mean that. However, no one paid attention to her at this moment. Everyone's attention was attracted by Song Qing-shu, who had walked to the crown prince's side. Noticing that the crown prince's skin had turned black, Song Qing-shu could not help but sigh at the tyranny of the hail silver needles. At the same time, he instructed the palace maids beside him, help the crown prince up. He then said to Wei Liaoing, Next, I am going to help the crown prince heal his injuries. I will have to trouble junior tutor to stand guard at the side. Don't worry, Prince Qi. With me here, no one will be able to come near. Wei Liaoing was the crown prince's martial arts teacher. Naturally, he understood that this was not the time to be disturbed. Otherwise, the crown prince would be gravely injured or even killed. He had actually tried to force the poison out of the crown prince's body, but the effect was minimal. Now that he saw that Song Qing-shu was willing to treat the crown prince, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Immediately after, he began to wonder if his side had gone too far by pressuring the crown prince during the morning court session. Chapter 2065. Song Qing-shu began to detoxify the crown prince. Although the poison of the soul, freezing silver needles, was an incurable and terrifying existence to ordinary Jianghu people, it was not a difficult task for the five uniques. Wei Liaoing had failed to force the poison out of the crown prince's body because of his lack of skill. Ouyang Feng, who had gone mad, had taught the young Yanghua a simple incantation, and he was able to force the poison out of the soul, freezing silver needles. Now that Song Qing-shu had personally forced the poison out of the crown prince's body, it was naturally much easier. About an hour later, the crown prince spat out the poison blood, and the soul, freezing silver needles poison was finally resolved. Song Qing-shu took the towel handed by the palace maid and wiped his hands. He said, For the next period of time, pay attention to your diet and do not eat anything that is too nutritious. Also, ask the imperial physician to prescribe some medicine to clear away heat and detoxify. After a period of rest, the crown prince will recover. In fact, the crown prince had been conscious just now, but his body was numb from the poison. Now that he had spat out the poisoned blood, he gradually regained control of his body. He could not help but salute with a complicated expression. Thank you for saving me. How could the crown prince not feel complicated? During the morning court, he had ordered his men to attack him. This time, he had come to the palace to discuss with Jia Fei about how to deal with him. In the end, he had to rely on him to save his life. Crown Prince, you are too kind. Song Qing-shu looked at Jia Fei and smiled meaningfully. Crown Prince, do you plan to recuperate in Chongqing Palace? The Crown Prince's expression changed. Wei Liaoing also hurriedly said, No, we're going back to recuperate. The appearance of the assassin was suspicious. They even suspected that it was sent by Jia Fei. How could they dare to stay in Chongqing Palace? It was best to return to their own territory. That's good too. I will arrange for guards to escort you. Song Qingshu thought that Li Macho had hit the nail on the head and helped him greatly. Jia Fei was hopping mad. She had gone to great lengths to get the crown prince into the palace, but he had left just like that. She knew that he suspected that the assassin was related to her, and it was useless to persuade him. After escorting the crown prince and his entourage out of the imperial palace, Song Qingshu took the opportunity to order the strengthening of the imperial palace's security, especially around Chongqing Palace. Of course, Consort Jia knew that the so-called protection was actually surveillance, but the other party had the right to do so, so she could not do anything. Wang Ziding quickly found Song Qingshu. Qingshu, the assassin, was too fast. Our brothers couldn't stop him. If only you were here. Song Qingshu knew that he had some doubts as to why he did not act, but he was already prepared for this. Just now, I was worried about the crown prince's condition, so I ran to the crown prince to circulate my energy to expel the poison. Qingshu Song Emperor. And Tian. Prince Wang Prince's safety is. Palace Tian is Prince's. The poison has been cleared. I'll be fine after resting for a while. Song Qingshu replied. Very fortunate, very fortunate. Wang Ziding was terrified. If something had happened to the crown prince in the palace, he, as the commander of the front department of the palace guards, would not be able to bear the consequences. Qingshu, who do you think sent the assassins? Song Qingshu laughed in his heart, but he still looked confused. I don't know. Wang Ziding's face was full of doubts. He muttered to himself, is it Jia Fei's people, or Shimi Yuan and Xueji, the two old foxes? Everyone has a motive. Who benefits the most from the crown prince's death? After thinking for a while, Wang Ziding could not think of a reason, so he said, Qingshu, don't leave the palace today, in case someone breaks in again. Okay. Song Qingshu did not want to leave the palace, but he did not have a legitimate reason to do so. Now that the crown prince was almost assassinated, who dared to say anything? After parting with Wang Ziding and returning to his room, Song Qingshu found that there was no one on the bed. He was shocked. Did she really run away? I'm here. Li Macho covered her chest and walked out from behind the screen with a pale face. Thank God, Song Qingshu said hurriedly. Now the palace guard have been greatly strengthened, and Li Macho is injured. If the guards found her, they might kill her on the spot. Since you're back, I should go, Li Macho said as she walked to the door. Song Qingshu frowned and hurriedly grabbed her arm. Didn't you hear what I just said? How can you go out in your current condition? Li Macho unnaturally shook off his hand and answered, the 9-turner sinus pill just now had a miraculous effect. I feel much better now. Although the 9-turner sinus pill is magical, it is not an elixir. How can it be healed so quickly? Song Qingshu did not care about her objection and pressed her to sit down on a chair. It has been a long time since you broke into the palace. You must be hungry. I especially went to the imperial kitchen to get some snacks. You can eat first. I am not hungry. As soon as Li Macho finished speaking, her stomach let out a growl, making her want to find a hole to hide in. All right, people are made of iron and rice is made of steel. Song Qingshu took a piece of osmanthus cake and stuffed it into her mouth. After eating, tell me, why did you appear in the palace and become an assassin? Li Macho was furious at his behavior, but she was hungry and could not resist the temptation of the fragrant osmanthus cake. She swallowed the food in her mouth. Eat slowly. There is more here. Song Qingshu handed her a cup of tea. Use this to fill your stomach first. I have ordered the imperial kitchen to prepare some food. Thank you. Li Macho was also very surprised. When did she become so polite? After eating a few pieces of cake, she felt much better and then replied, I came to the palace to find you. Find me? Song Qingshu's expression was strange. He thought of 10,000 possibilities, but he did not think of this situation. Could it be that Li Macho saw that I was handsome and was subdued by my charm, and finally came thousands of miles to find her lover? Noticing his expression, Li Macho knew that he thought wrong. She said angrily, "If you look at me with that kind of dirty eyes, believe it or not, I will dig your eyes out. You can't beat me." Song Qingshu secretly cursed, but he did not say it out to add fuel to the fire. Limacho said, "I saw the people sent by the Leaf family of Lin on Blackwood Cliff. After reading the letter, I knew that I might be their separated eldest daughter." After a pause, she continued, "At first, I had some doubts, but I also received your letter, so I came to have a look. Originally, I did not care about whether I was a family or not, but it was too boring to stay in Blackwood Cliff, so I came out for a walk." Noticing her slightly excited expression, Song Qingshu secretly sighed. Obviously, she cared about it, but she did not admit it. Was being arrogant the standard of a witch? After coming to Lin and we talked about some details. I should be the eldest daughter of the Leaf family that year. Limacho's tone was full of sorrow. If she had not been lost, she would not have been adopted by her master, and later she would not have met Lu Zhanyuan, and there would not have been a series of things. Later, I heard that you came back, so I planned to find you to express my gratitude. But now that your martial arts are high and you have power in the court, I can't think of how to repay you. Limacho was a little distressed. Fortunately, today I heard my father mention the matter in the court. I knew that you were facing the dilemma of being forced out of the palace, so I planned to come to the palace to make a scene. In this way, you will not be forced to leave, and I will repay you. Song Qingshu's expression was very interesting. After all, the initiator of all this was himself. Chapter 2066. Limacho continued. After entering the palace, I didn't know the way, so I wandered around. I happened to hear the crown prince and the imperial concubine discussing how to deal with you. I owe you a lot, so I can't let them go. I didn't know that the people around them were so good at kung fu. I almost couldn't escape. Song Qingshu sighed with emotion and said, "You're really lucky. Had it not been for the battle on Mount Wudong that wiped out all the experts in the imperial palace, I'm afraid you wouldn't have been able to leave so easily this time. Not to mention Huang Chong and the drunkard, Limacho might not be able to deal with those with imperial weapons." Hearing his explanation, Limacho said with some fear, "After entering the palace, I didn't meet many masters, so I really looked down on the palace. I didn't know there was such a reason." Song Qingshu suddenly felt a little embarrassed. "You came to help me, but I accidentally hurt you and treated you badly. I'm really sorry." Limacho turned her face away and said coldly, "Don't think too much. I'm a person who distinguishes between kindness and hatred. I only did this to return the favor. Now that I've returned the favor, we don't owe each other anything." Song Qingshu was stunned and could only smile bitterly. "If that's what you want, then so be it." Limacho continued, "Can I leave the palace now?" "Leave the palace now?" Song Qingshu frowned slightly. "You're injured and the entire palace is under martial law. It's not a good time to leave. If I don't leave the palace, do you want me to stay here with you for a night?" Limacho looked at him angrily, her expression full of wariness. Song Qingshu was speechless for a moment. Although he didn't have any bad intentions, it was a bit hard for a woman to stay with him in a room for a night. If it was before, Song Qingshu wouldn't care so much. But now that he knew that Limacho came for him, he didn't want to force her. But now the security is tighter. In your current state, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to get out." Song Qingshu said worriedly. Limacho didn't care at all. "You don't have to worry about that. I've been in Jianghu for so many years. What kind of danger have I not experienced?" Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment. "Forget it. I'll walk you out." Now, not only was the palace under martial law, but the entire Lin and city was also patrolled by soldiers searching for assassins. If Limacho was accidentally caught, he would not be at ease for the rest of his life. "But aren't you not allowed to leave the palace?" Limacho asked curiously. Song Qingshu explained, "There were assassins in the palace, and now the palace gate has been sealed. Even if other people wanted to enter, they would not be able to. It won't be a big deal if I go out for a short while." Previously, the guards under Wang Ziding's command were unable to stop many people mainly because they did not have a valid reason to do so. Now that there were assassins in the palace, He could justifiably stop any request from the nobles and ministers to enter and exit the palace. All right then. Limacho did not refuse. She was not a stubborn person. Otherwise, she would not have stirred up a storm of blood and could still be free and unfettered in Jianghu for so many years. Although it had been noisy for a long time, it was still daytime. Although Song Qingshu could disguise Limacho as his personal guard and take her out of the palace, it would be known by people with intentions that he left the palace. It was too risky, so he finally decided to sneak out of the palace. Finding a secluded place in the palace, Song Qingshu used his lightness skill and jumped over the palace wall with Limacho. After standing firmly, Limacho hurriedly broke free from his arms. Her face was slightly red. All right, I'll go by myself. For so many years, when had she been so intimate with a man? Even when she was passionately in love with Lu Zhanyuan, they did not cross the line at all. If you help the Buddha, help the West. I'd better send you back to the Li Mansion. Seeing that she was about to refuse, Song Qingshu smiled and pointed at her clothes. Now your clothes are disheveled. I guess you don't want to be surrounded by people on the way, right? Only then did Limacho remember that her coat had been taken off by him. She couldn't help but glare at him hatefully. It's all your fault. Song Qingshu couldn't help but ask. I'm actually very curious. It's obviously daytime. Why are you wearing nocturnal clothes? Isn't it more eye-catching? If I wear my own clothes, it's very likely that people with intentions will recognize some clues. The nocturnal clothes cover my whole body, so naturally, nothing will be revealed. Limacho looked at him strangely, with an expression that said, Why don't you know such a principle that everyone knows? I see. Song Qingshu suddenly understood. On the way, he asked Limacho from time to time about various things that happened in Blackwood Cliff and back to Linen City. As they chatted, they soon arrived at the Li Mansion. Don't enter from the main door. Limacho tugged at his clothes with an extremely embarrassed expression. Ever since she returned to the family, she knew that the Li family was a scholarly family that attached great importance to family integrity. Now that her clothes were disheveled, she didn't dare to let the people in the mansion see it. That's right. Song Qingshu smiled and directly jumped to the backyard with her in his arms. Where's your room? Over there. Limacho stretched out her finger and pointed to the other side of the corridor. Song Qingshu nodded. In a flash, he took Limacho to her door. When he was about to open the door unexpectedly opened by itself. Inside, a young woman in plain clothes with her hair in a bun put her hand on the door and looked at them with a stunned expression. Big sister, that kind of elegant and demure temperament was extremely unique. Who else could it be but Li Wan, the first young mistress of the Rongwa Mansion? Second sister, Limacho looked embarrassed and hurriedly pushed Song Qingshu away. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Song Qingshu looked natural. Oh, it's the young mistress of the Rongwa Mansion. Your sister was attacked on the road. I happened to run into her and saved her. Is that really the case? Li Wan's eyes fell on Limacho's untidy clothes. Her expression was extremely suspicious. However, after being in a big family for so many years, she had seen all kinds of dirty things. She had long practiced the ability to turn a blind eye. She followed his words and asked, Big sister, are you all right? No, nothing. Limacho forced a smile. Just a little injury. I'll be fine after a few days of rest. That's good. Li Wan nodded, but her eyes were a bit more mischievous. You entertain him for me. I'll go change my clothes first. Limacho finally couldn't stand it anymore. She directly entered the room and closed the door, leaving the two looking at each other. Li Wan's face was slightly hot. She thought that her sister really came from Jianghu and didn't know the seriousness of the situation. How could she let a woman living alone entertain an outsider? When she raised her head and met the other's eyes, Li Wan's heart jumped. She hurriedly lowered her head and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, she heard her father mention something and quickly had an idea. Your Highness, my father may have a way to solve your current troubles. Chapter 2067. Really, Song Qingshu was overjoyed. Thinking of how Li Shouzhong had been the chancellor of the directorate for so many years, his network was extensive and he was incomparably familiar with the rules of the imperial court. He might really have a way. Wang Yi, please come with me. Seeing the others so excited, Li Wan let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that she had guessed his troubles. Li Wan was wearing a plain long dress. She didn't have any makeup or jewelry that women usually wore, but she had an indescribably elegant and dignified temperament. Song Qing-shu followed behind her and looked at her graceful back. He couldn't help but sigh. Li Wan couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why is Wang Yi sighing?" Song Qing-shu answered, "I am lamenting that Madame is in the prime of her youth and has such a dignified and beautiful appearance. But she can only spend the rest of her life alone. It is truly a reckless waste of God's gift." Li Wan's expression changed. "Wang Yi, please be careful with your words." Seeing her reaction, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but smile bitterly. "It seems that my reputation in this area isn't very good. Madame misunderstood that I was flirting. In fact, I was just thinking that in my hometown, it is normal for a woman to remarry after a divorce, not to mention the death of her husband. Isn't Wang Yi's hometown near Jingzhou's Wudong? That is also the territory of the great Song. I have never heard of such a custom." Li Wan shook her head, answering seriously, "Moreover, how can a virtuous woman serve a second husband? I hope that Wang Yi will not say such troublesome things in the future." Even though he knew that she was poisoned by the etiquette of this world, he still respected her steadfastness. The two sank into silence, quickly arriving at Li Shouzhong's study. Seeing Song Qing-shu and his daughter coming together from the inner chamber, Li Shouzhong's expression also changed. "You?" Li Wan's face reddened slightly, and she explained the whole story. Hearing that he had escorted Li Macho back, Li Shouzhong let out a sigh of relief. Wang Yi previously allowed us women to reunite, and this time he saved Macho again. This great kindness, the Li family really doesn't know how to repay. Li Wan seized the opportunity to speak. "Father, isn't the Prince of Qi currently having a vexing matter? Helping him out with some ideas can be considered as repaying him." Li Shouzhong furrowed his brows and thought to himself, "Daughters are really losers. All of them turn to outsiders when they grow up, but all three of my children are daughters." Song Qing-shu was famous for his scandal. Hearing Li Wan speak up for him, Li Shouzhong's first reaction was that this guy wouldn't come to seduce his precious daughter, right? However, on second thought, he knew his daughter's character the best. She would never do anything that would bring shame to the family's reputation. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Seeing the change in Li Shouzhong's expression, Song Qing-shu also had some misgivings in his heart. He had a vague feeling that something was not right. He hastily said, "During the morning court session, I was attacked by a group of people. I hope Mr. can teach me how to break out of this situation." After hesitating for a moment, Li Shouzhong said to Li Wan, "Waner, go to the rear hall and accompany your older sister. I have something to discuss with the Prince of Qi." "Yes." Li Wan did not feel that there was anything wrong. Bowing, she took her leave. Song Qing-shu was somewhat surprised. He did not understand why Li Shouzhong had deliberately sent his daughter away. It couldn't be that his reputation was so bad that Li Shouzhong was worried that he would have crooked thoughts about her. "Although Waner is my biological daughter, she has long since married into the Jia family and is now a member of the Jia household. As a result, there are some things that are inconvenient for her to hear," Li Shouzhong explained. Only now did Song Qing-shu realize that he was overthinking. However, he became increasingly curious about what Li Shouzhong was going to say next. Li Shouzhong sighed. "I am a chancellor of the Directorate of Studies. I have a good relationship with the Jinshan Academy. Zhen Dexiu and Wei Liaoing are also close friends with me. Originally, even if my Li family owes you a great debt of gratitude, I would not help you come up with ideas to deal with them. However, you are related by marriage to the Wang family. In addition, you helped Yu Fei overturn the verdict. Everyone will view the Li family and you as one. I have no choice but to help." "Wang family related by marriage? Yu Fei overturned the verdict?" Song Qing-shu was startled. Suddenly, he remembered that Li Qiushui was also a member of the Li family. Her sister was Yu Fei's second wife. The Li family had a complicated relationship with the Wang family and the Yu family. Now that he was the future son-in-law of the Wang family and had once advocated for Yu Fei to overturn the verdict and protected Xiao Longnu in the palace, everyone knew about this. Therefore, the honor and disgrace of both parties had unknowingly been linked together. Even if Li Shouzhong wanted to stay out of this matter, other forces would not believe him. "I have implicated you," Song Qingshu said apologetically. Li Shouzhong shook his head and said, "The main thing is that I have thought it through. Instead of doing nothing and waiting to be punished in the future, it is better to seize the opportunity now. Perhaps I can even bring honor to the ancestors of the Li family." Song Qingshu had been in this world for so many years. He was very clear that for some big families, the interests of the family were the most important. Sometimes, it could even surpass the interests of the country. Li Shouzhong took a sip of tea to moisten his throat. He then said, "If you want to stay in the palace legitimately, it is not that there is no way." "Oh." Song Qingshu immediately sat up straight. Li Shouzhong said, "Right now, they're using righteousness to force you. As long as you also have a righteous status, they will have nothing to say. In the palace, other than the officials, other men are not allowed to exist. However, there are a few exceptions. They are the guards and the imperial physicians. However, even the guards and the imperial physicians can only stay in the outer palace. They are not allowed to enter the inner court unless they are summoned. But other than these people, there is a special kind of person who can enter and leave the inner palace with the emperor." "Who is it?" Song Qingshu was, after all, a foreigner. He was far less familiar with the official system of the Song dynasty than someone like Li Shouzhong. Now there are so many martial arts masters in the world. If they break through the defense lines outside the imperial palace and get close to the emperor, won't the emperor be at their mercy? Li Shouzhong explained. In order to avoid this situation, the emperor always keeps a few martial arts masters around him. Generally speaking, most of them are eunuchs. However, eunuchs are born with defects. Except for a few, their talent in martial arts is limited. They are far inferior to ordinary people, so they often need some normal guards to supplement them. Imperial equipment. Song Qingshu finally came to his senses. Li Shouzhong nodded with a smile. Over the years, the reason why there are very few imperial equipment is because of the strict selection of martial arts and family background. In fact, there is a very important reason. That is, no emperor wants to have too many other men in the harem. Therefore, every emperor only has a few imperial equipment around him. This way, his safety can be guaranteed, and it is easy to monitor and prevent trouble in the harem. I see. Only then did Song Qingshu realize that there was actually such a hidden story. Previously, during the Battle of Mount Wudong, all of the imperial equipment had been killed or injured. The only survivor, Ding Dian, was now unconscious and recuperating at home. This was enough reason to replenish the imperial equipment. Li Shouzhong continued. Of course, just the identity of imperial equipment may not be enough to stop people's mouths. Therefore, Your Highness needs to marry the princess as soon as possible. Originally, the emperor's son-in-law was not qualified to stay in the palace. However, the key is that the emperor's son-in-law is commandant. In this way, Your Highness and the emperor's family will become family. With this identity, many matters will become family matters. The court officials are outsiders and cannot interfere. In addition, there was an assassin in the palace today, and the crown prince was injured. This matter is actually very beneficial to you. Take advantage of this opportunity, and since you don't have the status problem, it is natural for you to stay in the palace. Song Qingshu had a strange expression. He wondered how Li Shouzhong would react if he knew that the assassin was his daughter. At this time, Li Shouzhong sighed. In fact, staying in the palace is not difficult. What is difficult is another matter. Chapter 2068. Song Qingshu hurriedly asked, "What's the matter?" Li Shouzhong replied, "This time, the officials attacked you for messing with the harem. Next time, they can find other reasons to attack you. Are you going to defend passively like this every time? As the saying goes, if you defend for a long time, you will lose. One day, you will be forced into a corner by them. Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly and said, "Of course I know that. But what can I do now? I can only deal with it as it comes." Li Shouzhong shook his head and said, "Although Prince Shi is now in a high position and seems to be under one person and above tens of thousands of people, it is just adding oil to the fire and flowers to make a brocade. Your decree can't be passed on to the people below. Even if it is passed, it will be distorted. In addition, some people will instruct their henchmen to attack your mistakes. In the end, it is because you have no foundation in the court. I'm also very clear about this problem, but where can I build my own team in such a short time?" Song Qing-shu also had a headache about this. Li Shouzhong looked at him and said meaningfully, "Now there is a ready-made force in the court." "Oh," Song Qing-shu hurriedly asked. Li Shouzhong replied, "A few months ago, Han Xingzhou was still in power in the court. Unfortunately, he was killed by Jia Shidao with a wave strike. The Han's group had no leader and was destroyed one by one. But back then, they were able to suppress Jia Shidao. How many officials did they have under them? Later, they were suppressed by Jia Shidao and were demoted one by one. But they didn't disappear. They just hid and waited for an opportunity. You have a good relationship with Han Xingzhou, so they have a natural good impression of you. So, if you want to build a team quickly, you have to rely on this group of people." Song Qing-shu was overjoyed and said, "Thank you for your advice, sir. Besides, I am not familiar with many people in the court. Who else in Han Xingzhou's group can be useful? I hope you can answer my questions." Li Shouzhong sighed. Back then, the Qingyuan faction was banned, and Han Xingzhou eliminated all dissidents and wantonly attacked the people of the Confucian school. From my standpoint, I should not speak for these people, but now that the Li family is in the same boat as you, it is impossible for me to stay out of this. Song Qing-shu sternly said, "Back then, the Qing Yuan party was banned largely because of the power struggle between Han Xingzhou and Zhao Ruyu. I am different from him. Moreover, I have always had a good relationship with the people of Jinshan Academy. Naturally, I will not attack the Confucian school like he did. Although many people in later generations criticized the Neo-Confucianism of the Southern Song dynasty, one could not ignore the era and discuss the problem. In this world, Neo-Confucianism still dominated, and it also had its positive meaning. A large part of the imperial court believed in this line. In history, Han Xingzhou attacked Neo-Confucianism and lost the people's support. During the Northern Expedition, there was a shortage of manpower, so they had to recruit some people from the Neo-Confucianism school to take charge of various tasks. In the end, this group of people all pretended to agree but opposed in secret and forcibly destroyed the whole Northern Expedition. Learning from his past mistakes, Song Qing-shu naturally would not make the same mistake. Moreover, with the yellow-clothed woman, Huang Chang, and Li Shouzhong, he could not wantonly attack the people of the school of Neo-Confucianism. Hearing him say this, Li Shouzhong smiled and said, "I know you are not this kind of person. Otherwise, I would not talk to you so much." Following that, he narrated a lot of people. Today in the imperial court, Zhen Dexiu and the others made things difficult for you. You could only go and refute them personally, which is really a disadvantage. In the past, Han Kuzhou received far more criticism than you did, but every time, he was as steady as Mount Tai, because his subordinates would take the initiative to refute them on his behalf, and there was no need for him to go personally. Although the imperial censorate is sure Mi Yuan's territory, he can't control every single person. Years ago, Han Xingzhou placed a few trusted aides in there. Lu Daxiu, Yang Defa, Lu Sanjia, and a few others as the imperial censorate are really good at debating. Every time they quote from the classics, they are not at all inferior to the great Confucian scholars of the Neo-Confucianism. Shen Jizu of the Minxiao province and Li Mu of the Hall of Governmental Affairs are all experts in handling government affairs. There is also the Assistant Minister of War, Chan Jia, who has always been familiar with military affairs. Before, Song Qing-shu only knew the senior members of Han Xingzhou's group, but he did not know the backbone of the middle level. Listening to Li Shouzhong's introduction of these people, he was suddenly enlightened. Li Shouzhong said, Han Xingzhou also had a lot of power in the military. Luo Ryuan, the general of the army, and Yang Ming and Zhang Xing, the officers of the front department and the infantry department, were all very rare talents. Unfortunately, they assassinated Jia Shidao to avenge Han Xingzhou. Now, no one knows if they are still alive or not. Alas, when the two factions fight, the talents of the country will be hurt. Hearing his sigh, Song Qingshu's expression was a bit strange. He had saved these people and arranged them to the Golden Snake Battalion. Now, he wanted to see if there was a chance for them to return to linen. After remembering all the names, Song Qingshu stood up and said goodbye. After all, he could not leave the palace for too long. He had wanted to talk to Li Macho again, but unfortunately, she would not come out to see him. Li Shouzhong looked strange, thinking that he had done something unspeakable to his daughter. Song Qingshu had to flee in a panic. After returning to the palace, he sent someone to summon those people mentioned by Li Shouzhong to the palace. They talked until late at night. The next day, in the political affairs hall, a eunuch in the palace sent a decree. Song Qingshu was appointed as the commander of the imperial armament, responsible for the safety of the emperor. Shi Miyuan and Xue Ji frowned, knowing that yesterday's assassination had made all this reasonable. However, they still made one last effort. Soon, some trusted subordinates questioned this. Their reasons were high-sounding. After all, Song Qingshu was the dignified Prince of Qi. It was a waste for him to be the commander of the imperial armament, and it was not in accordance with etiquette. This time, Song Qingshu did not need to come down from the stage to debate. Lu Daxiu, who was at the end of the crowd, directly stood up and refuted, "No, in the past, Prince of Xian also served as the commander of the imperial armament. How is this not in accordance with etiquette?" Prince of Xian and referred to Han Shizhong. Originally, Han Shizhong also had the title of Prince of Qi, but it was a posthumous title, which was different from Song Qingshu, who had been a prince when he was alive. Fearing that someone would make a fuss about this, he simply brought up Han Xingzhou's title in his early years. Yesterday, during the morning court session, he did not make a move only because he was not on Song Qingshu's side. So why should he stick up for him? But last night, after entering the palace and seeing many familiar faces, he felt as if he had found a new ally. In his excitement, he naturally wanted to wave the flag and shout for his new master. Seeing the spittle flying from both sides, each of them quoting classics and scolding each other, Song Qingshu was secretly pleased, thinking that professional haters should be professional haters. Seeing that the two sides were almost done debating, Song Qingshu found an opportunity to come out and say, "The current situation is special. Outside, the Jin Kingdom is like a tiger watching its prey, and inside, there are ambitious people coveting the treasures. At present, protecting the emperor's safety is the most important thing. The emperor has already issued an edict. As the saying goes, the words of an emperor cannot be taken lightly. There is no need to discuss this matter anymore." Shi Miyuan and Xue Ji looked at each other and could only accept the edict helplessly. However, from each other's eyes, they could feel the seriousness of the matter. The Han faction had completely sided with Song Qingshu. Next, the topic changed to the marriage of the two princesses. The officials of the Ministry of Rites believed that the marriage of the two princesses together was unprecedented, and all aspects of etiquette needed to be considered at length. Shen Jizu, the counselor, and Li Mu, the right minister, had already received the instructions. They stepped out and said, "Now the country is in turmoil. First, there was Wuxi's rebellion, then the invasion of the Jin Kingdom, and now there is the chaos of Mount Wudong. The court is in troubled times, and the whole country is in a state of panic. At this time, we can use the marriage of the two princesses to calm the people and grant amnesty to the people. Compared to the country, why should we care about such trifles?" Previously, the emperor ordered the wedding to be held as soon as possible. I think it is because of this consideration. Hearing this, Song Qingshu secretly admired them. He had only told them his intention last night, but they had come up with the specifics themselves. Listening to them talk about the country as the most important thing, it was not very glorious for the two princesses to work together for the same husband. But after hearing what they said, it was the two princesses who had sacrificed for the country. Between the lines, there was a kind of great righteousness. These scholars were really amazing when they spoke. With the help of the officials of the Han faction, the matter was quickly settled. Song Qingshu secretly sighed. The same thing, with the help of subordinates, was much easier to handle than a commander without an army. Sure, Miyuan and Xue Ji looked like they had accepted their fate, but Song Qingshu knew their temperament. They would not give up just like that. Now, they were just caught off guard by the appearance of the Han faction. When they reacted, they would be more prepared to counterattack. But when that time came, he would be more prepared. In the end, it was still uncertain who would settle the score. After a series of intensive preparations, 3 days later, Song Qingshu and the two princesses held a grand wedding. He was conferred the title of commandant of the emperor's son-in-law. An imperial edict came from the palace to grant amnesty to the world and celebrate with the people. The people jokingly called him the twin phoenix emperor's son-in-law, and he became the object of envy and jealousy for countless men. After all, Song Qingshu had many female confidants. To the common people, they did not have much of a concept, but everyone knew the princesses. Countless men dreamed of being favored by the princesses. As for two princesses sharing the same husband, that was something that they did not even dare to think about. But it just so happened that Song Qingshu turned this into a reality. How could this not make countless men jealous and jealous? The entire wedding process was not complicated. What was worth mentioning was that halfway through, Prince Ting pulled Song Qingshu aside and asked when his marriage with Yu Yan would be held, causing Li Qingluo's face to turn livid. She secretly warned Song Qingshu not to really have any ideas about Yu Yan. In addition, she also decided to send a letter to inform Yu Yan to stay at Beating Drum Mountain for a while and not come back so soon. To this, Song Qingshu could only shake his head and smile bitterly. After being busy for half a day and socializing for half a day, it was finally time to enter the bridal chamber. Song Qingshu drunkenly walked to the bridal chamber, but he was soon dumbfounded because the palace maid asked him, "Lord son-in-law, which princess's room should we go to first?" No matter how magnanimous Song Qingshu was, he knew that this kind of choice could not be made casually. Which room he went to first had too many implications. Even if the two princesses were blood-related sisters, it was impossible for them to not have any grudges about this. He cursed the officials of the Ministry of Rights half to death in his heart, thinking, can't they just let the two princesses wait for me in the same room? Chapter 2069. Song Qingshu said this out of anger. Of course, he knew that it was impossible. It was unprecedented for two princesses to marry the same man at the same time. If they were to wait for their husband in the bridal room like ordinary women, it would be inappropriate. How could the royal family face this? Moreover, even if it was an ordinary family, there was no reason for two brides to stay in the same room at the same time. While Song Qingshu was having a headache, a yellow figure suddenly walked out from the corridor. It was the yellow-shirted woman that he hadn't seen for a few days. Long time no see. When Song Qingshu said this, he felt a little guilty. But on second thought, he felt that his reaction was a little strange. Why did it look like he had bumped into his wife when he was having an affair outside? It's only been a few days. The yellow-shirted woman was still as beautiful as before, but there was a trace of loneliness between her brows. Right, I haven't had time to congratulate you. Hearing the lack of sincerity in her tone, Song Qingshu was a little embarrassed. He couldn't help but find a topic to talk about. I haven't seen you for a few days. What have you been busy with? Tidying up some of my master's belongings and thinking of him. The yellow-shirted woman sighed faintly. Obviously, she didn't want to continue this topic. She pointed to the room inside and said, I just wanted to talk to Yuan and Huan Er. Did I disturb you? You're not disturbing them. You're not disturbing them. You're their big sister, and you put in so much effort to save them. You're already the closest person to them in this world. Song Qingshu said embarrassedly. What's going on? Why is it so awkward to talk about this? The yellow-shirted woman shook her head. From now on, you'll be the closest person to them in the world. Song Qing-shu didn't know what to say for a moment. The yellow-shirted woman forced a smile. I won't disturb the bridegroom's wedding night. I will leave first. Then she turned to leave. Song Qing-shu subconsciously reached out to stop her, but he froze halfway. If it was a normal day, he could use words to keep her. But how could he keep her on a day like this? He couldn't say that she was lonely by herself, so why not stay in the bridal room with him? Song Qing-shu could not help but shiver when he thought of the possible reactions of the Azura field if he said that. Just then, the yellow-shirt woman suddenly stopped and said softly, "Right, I might be in seclusion at Jianshan Academy for a while." "Why are you in seclusion?" Song Qing-shu stilled. "Naturally, it is to practice the secret martial arts left behind by my master." At this time, the yellow-robed woman's face revealed an extremely sad expression. "If my martial arts were higher, Wudang Mountain would not have to sit and watch helplessly as everything happened." Leaving behind these words, her figure disappeared at the end of the corridor. Only the faint fragrance lingering in the air proved that she had stopped there. Song Qing-shu was silent. He did not know if the other's words were referring to his inability to save Huang Chong, or his inability to stop his puppet from controlling Zhao Guo. He didn't know if she meant that she couldn't save Huang Chong, or that she couldn't stop his puppet from controlling Zhao Guo. Song Qing-shu finally understood why the Japanese romance games in his previous life had so many parallel lines. It was destined that one could not have his cake and eat it too. No matter how capable you were, getting close to some people would eventually widen the distance between you and others. Emperor's son-in-law, it's almost time. Where should we go first? A palace maid ran over to ask for his opinion. Song Qing-shu felt a headache coming on. He had just hurt their sister. Was he going to hurt one of them by making a choice now? Just as he was having a headache, another palace maid ran over to report. Song Qing-shu recognized her as Zhao Yuanyuan's personal maid. The maid bowed and said, "Our master asked me to send a message. Emperor's son-in-law, please go to my sister's side first." Song Qing-shu didn't expect the other to send such a message. Zhao Yuanyuan's gentle and demure face appeared in his mind. He knew that she was the most understanding person. She must have guessed that he was in a difficult situation, so she took the initiative to help him out. How can anyone not like a woman like her? Just as he was feeling emotional, Zhao Yuanyuan's personal maid also ran over. She bowed to Song Qing-shu and said, "Emperor's son-in-law, our princess invites you to go to my sister's side first. She said that all these years, it has always been my sister who has let her have all the good things first. This time, it is her turn to let you have them." Hearing this, Song Qing-shu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why did she make it sound like he was a thing? He was clearly not a thing. No, ba. Song Qing-shu really didn't expect Zhao Yuanyuan, who had always been willful and arrogant, to be so understanding. At this time, the two maids were already quarreling and pushing Song Qing-shu towards each other. Clearly, when they came out, their master had repeatedly reminded them to be afraid that they wouldn't be able to complete their task. Seeing the two girls argue until their faces were red, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but feel a sense of absurdity. Other people were fighting for ownership, but they were pushing each other to have ownership. After listening for a while, Song Qing-shu finally couldn't help but clear his throat and separate the two maids. "Don't fight. I won't go to either room. Let them come to my room." The two maids were dumbfounded and couldn't react for a moment. The older maid frowned and said, This isn't appropriate." Song Qing-shu glared at her. "What's inappropriate?" "I'm afraid this isn't appropriate." The maid couldn't help but take a step back. She was in charge of the royal etiquette. If it was another emperor's son-in-law who was so arrogant, she might have directly slapped him. After all, an ordinary emperor's son-in-law wasn't as glorious as people thought. But who was this person in front of her? He was unparalleled in martial arts and had power in the court. How could she dare to offend him? Song Qing-shu waved his hand. "Since you've entered my house, you should follow the etiquette of my house. There aren't many rules in my house, and I won't force the two princesses. Everything is up to them. However, he was really worried that the two girls would be too shy and wait for each other. No one dared to take the first step. If that happened, the three monks would really have nothing to eat. So he instructed the two maids, "When you go back, tell the princess that I'm dead drunk and in need of care in my room." The two maids blinked their eyes as if they were shocked by his shamelessness. The face of the maid on the side twitched. She thought that the ladies in the capital all dreamed of him. If they knew that he was such a ruffian, she wondered what they would think. "By the way, I don't want anyone to say a word about what happened here today. If I hear any rumors, everyone in the yard will be sent to Cliff State." When Song Qingshu said this, he released his great grandmaster's aura. After releasing the aura of a great grandmaster, how could these maids and palace maids withstand it? They all felt as if they were about to die. At this time, Cliff State was not the place where it was spring all year round. It was the most remote place in the Song dynasty, full of snakes and insects. Those who were sent there had never been heard of coming back alive. The palace maids trembled and nodded in agreement. Seeing their frightened looks, Song Qingshu felt a little sorry. "Today is my big day. Later, everyone could go and get a red packet of 20 taels of silver." "Thank you, Emperor's son-in-law. Emperor's son-in-law is so nice. I wish Emperor's son-in-law and the princess a son soon." The maid's worries turned to joy. 20 taels of silver was a huge sum of money for ordinary people. Song Qingshu nodded and returned to his room with a smile. He began to pretend to be drunk. Outside, the two little palace maids looked at each other in dismay. Obviously, they were going through a very intense psychological struggle. However, Song Qingshu's strength and terror were too great a deterrent to them. In the end, the two little palace maids persuaded each other. Since they were going to be a family, and the two princesses couldn't push things around, they sold their master at the same time. Zhao Yuanyuan learned that Song Qingshu was very drunk. When she went over, she found that her sister Zhao Hure was already there. It turned out that she was very careful. At first, she was worried that it would be inappropriate to come like this. Later, she hesitated for a while and finally came to see him because she was worried about her lover. Unlike Zhao Hure, who was careless and didn't think about other things, she came directly when she heard the news. Seeing Zhao Hure clumsily wringing the towel, Zhao Yuanyuan couldn't help but smile. "Let me do it. Brother Song will be fine, right?" Seeing that Song Qingshu was sleeping like a dead pig, Zhao Huan'er could not help but feel a little flustered. She had heard people say that it was easy to die if one was too drunk, and even a perfected golden immortal would not be able to save them. Although she knew that the possibility was very low, she was still nervous. "I don't know which bastard is forcing Brother Song to drink. Send someone to investigate tomorrow. When the time comes, I'll ask the Emperor to banish them to Cliff State," Zhao Hure said angrily. "Nonsense again." Zhao Yuanyuan looked at her sister reproachfully. Which family doesn't drink a lot of wine when they get married? As if reminded, Song Qingshu, who was sleeping on the bed, turned over and grabbed randomly as if to grab a non-existent wine cup. "Wine, I want a drink." "You still want a drink?" Zhao Hure curled her lips. "Now we can't even drink the nuptial wine." The wedding night was a day that every girl looked forward to, and the nuptial wine was the last ceremony of the wedding. Without it, the girls inevitably felt a little disappointed. I'm talking about drinking the nuptial wine. The two girls felt their bodies suddenly being hugged by someone. Then they heard a teasing voice. "Ah!" The two girls were startled and instinctively jumped up. After seeing that it was Song Qingshu, they heaved a sigh of relief. "Big brother Song, you not drunk?" Song Qingshu said with a smile. "I drank a lot today, so I'm a little drunk." At this point, Zhao Yuanyuan still didn't understand. Her face blushed. "You deliberately tricked us here. Come, wonderful bookhouse." Chapter 2070. Song Qingshu smiled slyly like a fox. "If I didn't do this, you wouldn't have the nerve to come here." Zhao Yuanyuan blushed and stood up to leave. Zhao didn't want to leave, but seeing her sister stand up, she was too embarrassed to stay and could only stand up. Song Qingshu was anxious and immediately grabbed their hands. "Hey, you're already here. Why are you leaving now? Zhao Yuanyuan lowered her head and blushed. It's not polite. Seeing Zhao Huaner chiming in, Song Qingshu couldn't help but say, it's not like we haven't done this before. What's wrong with it? The two girls could not help but recall the thrilling experience in the Jin Kingdom's palace. They had put on a show in order to overthrow the crown prince and Wei Wang. Thinking of the erotic process, even Zhao Huaner, who had a carefree personality, could not help but blush. That's different. Zhao Yuanyuan thought for a long time and finally came up with a reason that wasn't really a reason. How is it different? Song Qingshu looked at her teasingly. Anyway, it's different. Zhao Yuanyuan didn't know what to say, and her face was almost red. Zhao Huaner also whispered, Brother Song, this is really not good. Song Qingshu didn't think it was a big deal at first, but when he saw the two girls persevering with an awkward expression, he suddenly realized that he couldn't let them bear the criticism they didn't deserve just because he wanted to enjoy himself. Moreover, today was their big day, and he didn't want to leave them the slightest bit unhappy. Thinking of this, he didn't insist anymore and finally let go of the two girls. Okay, you go back to your room first. I'll find you. You go to Huaner first. Zhao Yuanyuan hurriedly ran out. When she returned to her room, she felt her heart pounding. She quickly poured a glass of water and drank a mouthful. Suddenly, she heard the sound of someone opening the door. She was startled and hurriedly sat on the bed, picking up the fan to cover her face again. Seeing her panic, Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh. Don't be afraid, it's me, he said as he closed the door. Zhao Yuanyuan vaguely saw him through the fan and couldn't help but ask, Didn't you go to Huer's place? Why? Song Qingshu walked over with a smile and said, It was Huer who asked me to come over to your side first. He walked over to the bedside and took the fan from her hand, revealing a young girl's extremely shy and pretty face. Zhao Yuanyuan's heart, she was so nervous that she subconsciously wanted to grab the fan beside her. However, she suddenly realized that the fan was used to cover a woman's embarrassment when she got married. After the husband took it off in the bridal chamber, there was no reason for her to pick it up again. She could only nervously twist the corner of her clothes. Thinking that this was the most important moment in her life, she was so nervous that she didn't know what to say. Although Hua usually seems careless, she has a delicate side to her. Song Qingshu sat down beside her. She told me that you usually take care of her and give in to her in everything. Now, it's her turn to give in to you. Besides, she's not giving in to her husband. She's just asking me to go to her place later. I feel even more guilty when she says that, Zhao Yuanyuan said with a frown. We're all family. Why are you still fussing over this? Song Qingshu was worried that the two of them would push each other and end up making the atmosphere cold. He got up and walked to the table. The nuptial wine had already been prepared. He poured a cup and handed it to Zhao Yuanyuan. Wife, it's time to drink the nuptial wine. Yes, husband. Zhao Yuanyuan bit her lip and didn't refute in the end. She took the nuptial wine. Throughout the whole process, she could clearly hear her own heartbeat. Hearing the word husband from her soft voice, Song Qingshu suddenly felt some interference in his throat. Zhao Yuanyuan had always been the gentle and quiet type. At this time, her voice was full of shyness and love. It was really too sweet. The girl's lips still had water stains from the nuptial wine. Under the candlelight, she looked particularly dazzling and alluring. Song Qingshu couldn't help but kiss her. Zhao Yuanyuan's eyes widened and her body instantly froze. Her hands tightly grasped the hem of her clothes, not knowing where to put it. However, thinking that the other was already her husband, she slowly closed her eyes. Only her slightly trembling eyelashes showed that her mood at this time was not so calm. Feeling the girl's body soften, Song Qingshu gently pulled her into his arms and enjoyed the girl's sweet and charming youthful aura. Song Qingshu was very experienced. Zhao Yuanyuan had never seen such a method of flirting with a lady. Not long after, her breathing became rapid and her emotions surged. Her whole body was completely controlled by the other. She didn't know when, but her whole body was lying on the brocade quilt. The clothes on her body gradually decreased. She knew what was coming and didn't dare to open her eyes. Seeing Zhao Yuanyuan's nervous appearance, Song Qingshu didn't force her to open her eyes. Instead, he quietly enjoyed it. A girl's tenderness and shyness was one of the most charming scenery in the world. Compared to the maturity and passion of a young married woman, it could be said that the plum blossoms were like orchids. Bamboo and chrysanthemum each had their own advantages, and both were things that men could not refuse. Feeling the weight of the man on her body, Zhao Yuanyuan knew that the most important moment was coming. She wanted her lover to extinguish the red candles in the room, but she was too shy to say anything. The only thing she could do was to obediently open her body and gently welcome the arrival of her husband. After an unknown amount of time, Zhao Yuanyuan pushed the man beside her. "Husband, you should go to Huer." Her voice was very soft and trembling. It seemed to be mixed with a bit of pain, but it was more sweet. The room kept ringing with her soft pleading and urging. Okay, I'll go." Song Qingshu reluctantly got up from the bed. From the beginning, Zhao Yuanyuan had been urging him, but now he finally couldn't refuse. Wait a minute, a snow-white arm stretched out from under the red quilt and pulled him back. Although Zhao Yuanyuan was extremely tired, she still got up and helped him put on his clothes. "Put on your clothes. If you go over like this, it'll be like, what will it look like?" Song Qingshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Anyway, I'm going to take off my clothes soon. Why bother?" Zhao Yuanyuan wrapped the quilt in front of her body. However, this was to help him put on his clothes, so the quilt inevitably slipped because of her movements. Her dazzling white skin was reflected by the red mandarin duck quilt. It was really pitiful. "Husband, don't play around." Zhao Yuanyuan blushed and pushed his mischievous hand away. Every girl looks forward to their wedding night. If you go there with your clothes in such a disheveled state, even if little sister Huer doesn't say anything, it's inevitable that she'll be disappointed. Song Qingshu was stunned. He realized that what she said made sense, so he stopped touching her and started to put on his clothes seriously. Soon, he looked exactly the same as before he entered the room. He even put on the groom's hat. Zhao Yuanyuan nodded in satisfaction. "It's finally about time. Go to Sister Huer's place." Song Qingshu hugged her lightly and kissed her forehead. "I'll be back in a while." Zhao Yuanyuan's gentleness just now was really lingering. Zhao Yuanyuan blushed and said hurriedly, Don't come back. Stay with your sister later." Song Qingshu knew that she was embarrassed and was always thinking of his sister. He rolled his eyes and came up with a plan. "We'll see how it goes later. I'll go over first." Zhao Yuanyuan didn't know if it was because she was shy or something else, but she got back under the blanket and only responded in a small voice. "Come, wonderful book house." Chapter 2071. Song Qingshu came to the other room. After entering the door, he saw Zhao Huer sitting on the bed with her eyes half closed. Her body swayed from time to time, making the people around her worried that she would fall to the ground. Song Qingshu could not help but laugh. This girl was really careless. She actually fell asleep on her wedding night. Although she had waited for him for half the night, if it was Zhao Yuanyuan, who was meticulous, she would definitely be full of all kinds of thoughts at this time. How could she fall asleep? He stopped the maid from waking her up and motioned her to go out first. The little maid blushed and smiled as she closed the door for the two of them. She came to the bed and sat down. At such a close distance, Zhao Huer's fair skin looked even more delicate, exuding the youth and beauty of a young girl. Song Qingshu's heart was full of pity for making her wait for half the night. At this time, Zhao Huer's body swayed and she lost her balance. He hurriedly hugged her from the side. His movements were very gentle, for fear of waking her up. If it was any other time, Zhao Huer might have fallen asleep, but today was her wedding night. No matter how careless she was, she would not really fall asleep. She felt her body move and subconsciously woke up. When she found herself lying in the arms of a man, she could not help but be shocked and almost cried out. It was not until she saw the other person's face that she breathed a sigh of relief. "Did I scare you?" The change of the other person's expression did not escape Song Qingshu. Zhao Huer sat up straight and subconsciously wiped the non-existent saliva from the corner of her mouth. I accidentally fell asleep. I made a fool of myself in front of you. You are married, but you still speak so politely. Song Qing-shu noticed that she was nervously tidying up her clothes and seemed to be worried about her makeup. He could not help but smile and hold her hand. Don't worry, you are very beautiful now. Really? Zhao Hue blushed and lowered her head, embarrassed to look at him. Her little hands were very soft, and coupled with the infinite shyness of a young girl, Song Qing-shu's heart seemed to be teased by a pair of invisible hands. His heart was a little hot, but he also knew that he could not leave any regrets for her. My wife, it's time to drink the nuptial wine. Zhao Huan who had always been carefree, was like a shy quail when she heard the other party's greeting. She only responded softly. After drinking the nuptial wine, Song Qing-shu lowered his head to kiss her lips. Zhao Huan seemed to know what was coming, and her small hands tightly grasped his clothes. Song Qing-shu was already having a hard time over there. At this time, he was hugging the soft body of a young girl who was full of love for him and tasting her sweet lips. He only felt that his whole body was extremely swollen. How could he still endure it? He casually put down the curtain beside the bed, and the two figures slowly fell onto the bed. There was only the sound of the red candle burning in the room, mixed with the soft whispers of a young girl from time to time. Go to my sister's side. After an unknown amount of time, Zhao Huan shy voice came from under the red quilt. The young girl's cheeks were still faintly visible with tears, but there was not the slightest sadness, only satisfaction and happiness. Song Qing-shu could not help but laugh. You two really have telepathy. Just now, Yuan kept driving me over to your side, and now you keep driving me over to her side. So I'm so unpopular. No, Zhao Huan hurriedly said. I just don't want my sister to be sad alone. Aren't you afraid that I'll be sad? Song Qing-shu said gloomily. Just now, I was also in a dilemma, and now I'm in a dilemma because of your teasing. It's really uncomfortable. Zhao Huan's cheeks blushed. Thinking of the charm just now, for a moment, she also felt a little reluctant. Seeing that she had acquiesced, Song Qing-shu smiled and went back under the quilt. Zhao Huan raised her head slightly, revealing her snow-white and slender neck. She bit her red lips and subconsciously closed her eyes tightly. Between her brows, there was an expression that could not be determined whether it was pain or happiness. After a long time, Zhao Huan lay in her lover's arms, unable to summon any strength. Husband, I can't be so selfish. You really should go to my sister's side. Otherwise, she'll be so lonely and sad. Song Qing-shu had a headache. I don't want to be chased over by her again later. He thought of staying in this room for a while, and then in another room for a while. There was no time for a good night's rest. But Zhao Huan frowned. Obviously, she did not want her sister to be sad. Song Qing-shu suddenly moved closer to her ear and whispered softly. Zhao Huan's face instantly turned red. How can you do that? Why not? Song Qing-shu kept trying to persuade her. Anyway, the ceremony has just ended. There are no regrets for each of you. But how are we going to meet people tomorrow? Zhao Huan turned around, leaving only her smooth and white back facing him. Hearing that her tone had softened, Song Qing-shu moved closer and said, You are only worried about being seen by the people in the palace. When the time comes, there will be some rumors, so I did not force you. I asked you to go back to your rooms and stop other people from talking. It is already late at night, and there are not many people outside. Moreover, with my martial arts, I can guarantee that no one will find out. Zhao Huan blinked. It was unknown whether she was thinking seriously or thinking about how to refuse. No matter which one of you is left alone on your wedding night, I will not go. That is why I have no choice but to do this. Song Qing-shu continued to persuade her. Zhao Huan blushed and spat. I'm not a fool. How can I not know what my husband is thinking? Song Qing-shu's expression was a little embarrassed when his thoughts were directly exposed. Zhao Huan bit her lip and finally made up her mind. You have to send me back before dawn. Otherwise, if the servants see us, we really won't be able to live. Okay. Song Qing-shu could not help but be overjoyed. He wrapped the quilt around her and hugged her in his arms. He even used imminent skyline to go to the other room. "Husband, why are you here again?" Hearing the noise in the room, Zhao Yuanyuan asked softly. She tried to get up, but her body was very tired. Song Qingshu replied as he closed the door, "I don't want you to spend your wedding night alone. But what about Huaner if you come here?" Zhao Yuanyuan asked anxiously. At this time, Song Qingshu had already come to the bedside. "So I brought her here, wrapped in the quilt. Only her head was exposed." Zhao Huaner blushed and called out timidly, "Sister, ah?" Zhao Yuanyuan exclaimed. She was half awakened from her drowsiness and hurriedly sat up. "Aren't you two making trouble? There are many people in the palace. Once this gets out, not only will the royal family lose face, but you will also be impeached by the censor." She had always been gentle, but now she was unprecedentedly serious. Song Qingshu put Zhao Huaner down and gently comforted her. "Don't worry, no one will see. I will quietly send Huan back before dawn." Seeing that she still wanted to say something, Song Qingshu hurriedly said, "I just don't want any of you to spend the night alone. Don't worry, I will only sleep and do nothing else." Zhao Yuan bit her lip and sighed after a long time. "I am really afraid of you." Chapter 2072. Early the next morning, Song Qingshu walked out of his room feeling refreshed. As for whether he kept his promise last night and only slept, only they knew. "Good morning, Lord Prince Consort." The palace maids bowed to him one after another. After they left, they whispered to each other, "Lord Prince Consort's stamina is really good. Last night, he went to the two princesses' rooms, but he got up so early today as if nothing had happened. You little hussy, your face is so red. You must be in love. Lord Prince Consort is an immortal from heaven. How would I dare to have any improper thoughts?" Hearing the indistinct voices coming from behind, Song Qingshu's expression was a little strange. He did not expect that one day he could become so popular. Coming to the government hall to handle official business, the ministers were all surprised that he had gotten up so early to handle official business. They all congratulated him and admired him. After finishing his official business, Song Qingshu suddenly received a letter from Prince Qi's mansion, learning that the group of guards sent by Golden Snake Camp had arrived in Lin. He could not help but be overjoyed and ran to discuss it with Wang Ziding. Wang Ziding did not refuse and quickly arranged official positions for these people, putting them in charge of Zhao Gou's close defense. Then he quietly pulled Song Qingshu and said, "Qingshu, you should also know that the Imperial Palace Guards were originally my territory. Now, I readily agreed to let your people be placed here. First, we are in the same boat now and must unite to fight against other forces. Second, it is mainly for Yiyan's sake. Anyway, sooner or later we will be family, so there is no need to regard me as an outsider." Song Qingshu echoed and said to himself, "With the close relationship between me and Li Qingluo, we can actually be considered family now." Wang Ziding changed the topic and began to ask about the date of his wedding with Wang Yuyan, making Song Qingshu flustered. "I have just married the princess. If I marry Yuyan at this time, it will be unavoidable to be criticized, and it will also make her feel wronged." Song Qingshu racked his brains and finally gave up on the idea for the time being. After parting ways, Song Qingshu secretly thought that Li Qingluo had told a white lie in order to prevent the two sides from fighting each other on the Wutang Mountain, and now it was really a little difficult to clean up. If he told the truth, it was hard to guarantee that Wang Ziding wouldn't fall out with him. Even if he endured it, the two sides would no longer have the basis for cooperation. In the future, their cooperation would definitely not be as close as it was now. During this period of time, everyone in Lin was an enemy. He did not want to turn his only ally, the Wang family, into an enemy. Unfortunately, no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't think of a solution that could satisfy both sides. At present, he could only use the delaying tactic. Another piece of good news came in the afternoon. The people from the Vulture Palace had arrived as well. Song Qingshu's tense nerves finally relaxed. With this group of people and the guards of the Golden Snake Camp, he could finally completely control the Imperial Palace. After being led into the palace, the 4 personal maids, Plum, Orchid, Bamboo, and Chrysanthemum, looked around curiously. Wow, is this the Imperial Palace? What? It's not much bigger than the Spirit Vulture Palace. And the scenery is far worse than that of the Vulture Palace. Yes, this Imperial Garden is too small. There are so many Imperial concubines in such a small garden. You can see them all the time. Song Qing-shu was speechless. He thought, this is the Imperial Palace. Doesn't the Imperial Palace care about its reputation? Well, don't make a big fuss. Otherwise, people will laugh at us. Song Qing-shu was a little guilty. He always had a feeling of bringing a group of bumpkins into the city. The maids pulled out half of the swords in their hands and snorted, "If anyone dares to laugh at us, we will kill them with a sword." Song Qing-shu put his hand on his forehead and felt very tired. This group of people were used to being lawless in the Vulture Palace. After all, they were the local snakes there. Every time people from the 36 islands and 72 caves came up to the mountain, they would be in fear and trepidation. They often killed them and took their lives. Naturally, their temperament was a little wild. "You don't even listen to me?" Song Qing-shu said with a straight face. Seeing that he was really angry, the maids immediately became quiet. They quickly bowed respectfully and said, "We don't dare." Song Qing-shu nodded and continued, "This is the Imperial Palace. If you make a mistake, not only will your lives be in danger, it will also give me something to talk about. When that time comes, who knows how many people in the Imperial Court will take the opportunity to attack me." Although the maids did not care about the words, life and danger, they still understood that it would bring trouble to their honorable lord. They quickly nodded. Song Qing-shu had a headache. He thought that he had miscalculated before. It would not be easy to let these arrogant women learn the rules of the Imperial Palace. Fortunately, Granny Yu and the other experienced people came with them. They quickly scolded Mei, Lan, Zhu, and began to restrain them. Song Qing-shu nodded secretly. Although Granny Yu was not famous in Jianghu, her martial arts were extremely high. She had once fought with Xian Ci of Shaolin Temple. Xian Ci, who only used 50% of his inner force, was no match for her. Therefore, Granny Yu was at least 70 to 80% of Xian Ci's level. She could completely be compared to the imperial weapons in the Imperial Palace. Among the 9 divisions of the Vulture Palace, Granny Yu was the leader of the Haotian division. Although the leaders of the other divisions were slightly inferior, they were not far behind. Each of the other disciples also had extraordinary martial arts. The key was that they could be arranged in the imperial harem as palace maids. With this new force, Song Qing-shu could finally rest assured. Next, he spent a few days familiarizing the people of the Vulture Palace with the situation in the Imperial Palace. Then he asked them to find the little maids in Concubine Jia's palace and report that Concubine Jia had harmed Concubine Wu. In the past, there was a rumor that Concubine Wu had died suddenly in the Imperial harem. Everyone was deeply suspicious of this, but the water in the Imperial harem had always been deep. No one was stupid enough to get involved. However, everyone suspected Concubine Jia, who had always been at odds with Concubine Wu. Now that they heard this news, they all felt that it was as they had expected. With the palace maids testifying and the sudden appearance of Concubine Wu, the victim, it could be said that the evidence was irrefutable. Now that Jia Sherdao was dead, Concubine Jia was alone and helpless. In addition, there had been assassins in the Chongqing Palace. The Crown Prince and his people also suspected that she was behind this, so they did not do anything. Sure, Miyuan and Xue Ji wanted to help, but they could not reach into the imperial harem. In addition, there was too much evidence, so they waited over and over again and finally did not intervene. In the end, the emperor decreed that Concubine Jia was banished to the Cold Palace, and Concubine Wu became the most favored concubine in the imperial harem again. Then, Song Qing-shu secretly recruited the Golden Snake Battalion to guard the capital with Zhao Guo's order. In order to cover it up, Song Qing-shu let the troops of the Golden Snake Battalion bypass the Zhanghuai defense line of the Southern Song dynasty and go by sea. Then, they landed near Shanin. Shanin was the territory of the Liu family, and Lu Guining was there to meet them. So, it was not until the troops entered the city of Lin and that other people came to their senses. Song Qingshu was the nominal leader of the imperial court. The troops entering the capital had become a fait accompli. All the forces had to accept their fate and temporarily put off the action against Song Qingshu. Shi Miyuan and Xue Ji had a private meeting. In the end, they could not help but sigh. Song Qingshu is going to follow the story of Dong Zhuo and Ho Jing. Chapter 2073. With the support of the army, Song Qingshu began a full-scale counterattack. First, he purged the remnants of Prince Yi's party. A series of officials involved in Prince Yi's rebellion were purged. Because Prince Yi had always been close to the four families, many officials from the Jia family, the Shi family, and the Xue family were also involved. Of course, Song Qingshu still left some leeway. He did not touch the people in the core circle of these families, lest they fought to the death. Even so, many branches were purged and a large number of positions were vacant. Song Qingshu took the opportunity to promote the old officials of the Han family. Of course, in order to avoid the same mistakes as Han Xingzhou, he followed Li Shouzhong's suggestion to recommend the talents and wantonly roped in people from the Jianshan Academy. First, the ban on learning was lifted. Zhao Ruyu and LV Zuqian, who were dismissed when Han Xingzhou was in power, were reinstated. He also conferred posthumous titles on Zhu Shi. He summoned Lin Dezhong, Lu Yu, and 15 other old officials to the court. He promoted many Confucian scholars such as Yang Jian and Li Xinchuan. Even Zhen Dexiu and Wei Liaoing, who had once impeached him, were rewarded and promoted. Then Zhu Shi, Zhou Dunyi, Cheng Hao, Cheng Yi, and Zhang Zai, who did not meet the conditions of posthumous titles, were given posthumous titles of Wan, Yuan, Chun, Zheng, and Ming respectively. As a result, even though Song Qingshu had married 2 princesses at the same time, and his actions of using troops to strengthen himself went against the principles of rationalism, the school of rationalism enjoyed unprecedented treatment and had a much better impression of him. Even though there were still some great Confucian scholars who frequently impeached him, they were in the minority. He had successfully won the friendship of most people in Jianshan Academy. Of course, in addition to this, Song Qingshu spent a lot of energy on controlling the army. Now he controlled the emperor and held the Tiger Seal. At the same time, he was also the Pingzhong military affairs and had the authority to mobilize troops. According to the system of the Song dynasty, in theory, the army would listen to him. But there were some changes in the power structure of the Song dynasty in this world. The 4 families were too deeply rooted. Many people in the army were their disciples. If something really happened, he might not be able to mobilize the army. Coming from the later generations, he deeply understood that political power came from the barrel of a gun, so he attached great importance to it. Fortunately, Han Xingzhou's influence in the army was quite large, and with these people as his team, it would be much easier for him to rebuild the system. Luo, Rian, Yang Ming, Zhang Xing, Hua Yu, and the others who used to be the core of the Japanese army had also been transferred back by him from the Golden Snake Camp. Although they had committed a serious crime of assassinating Jia Sherdao was dead, and he was the head of the imperial court, so it wasn't too difficult for him to find a reason to clear their names. These people had a wide network in the army and were familiar with Han Xingzhou's former team. With their help, Song Qingshu quickly gained control of the army near the capital. In addition, Gao De, Xiang Shibi, and the others had defected previously, and Sichuan was originally under his control. Now he was finally no longer as worried as before, and the situation in the Southern Song dynasty had temporarily stabilized. Of course, the influence of Shi Miyuan, Xue Ji, and the remaining forces of the Jia family in the army couldn't be underestimated. In a short time, Song Qingshu couldn't control all the army, but at least he could ensure that they couldn't use the army to eliminate the emperor's side openly. Ren Yingying had also been taken to the palace. During this time, he needed to train her to learn his behavior habits, voice, and so on. At the same time, he also let her get in touch with the confidants he had promoted in the imperial court during this time. Song Qingshu originally didn't think that it would be so troublesome, but he was very clear that the peace in Lin and was based on his personal strength and prestige. If everyone knew that he had left Lin, all parties would definitely take action, and Ren might not be able to suppress it alone. Maybe the team he had worked hard to build during this time might also change sides. Therefore, he could only let Ren Ying disguise herself as him and stay in the capital. In Lin, no one was more suitable than her. Whether it was Chun Yuanyuan or Li Qingluo, they all had their own shortcomings, so Song Qingshu dared not easily hand over this place to them. As for Ah Ku, Zhao Yuanyuan, and Zhao Huan he didn't even consider them. Only Ren Ying was the most trustworthy, smart, and astute. The key was that she used to be the superior Saint Nun and had a natural temperament of a superior. In addition, she was in charge of Prince Qi's mansion some time ago, so she had accumulated a certain amount of experience and prestige. Moreover, Ren Ying had the power of the Sun Moon sect behind her. Although the members of the Sun Moon sect were mixed, they did have a large number of talents. In addition, Song Qingshu was worried that after he left the palace, there would not be enough force to suppress them. After all, the Shi family still had the imperial preceptor, Shi Hao, and the Shui family also had the sword god Shui. No matter who they were, the masters of the Vulture Palace and the Golden Snake Camp alone might not be able to stop them. As for Li Qingluo, the relationship between them was very subtle. They were said to be lovers, but their relationship seemed to be a little off. If they were simply friends with benefits, they seemed to have made a lot of feelings for each other. Because she had a certain degree of independence, it was impossible for her to stay in the palace all day to assist Ren Ying. Moreover, she might not be a match for Shi Hao, Shui Yi, and the others by herself. Song Qingshu originally had a headache, but in the end, Ren Ying solved the problem. It turned out that Ren Wuxing was worried about his daughter and came to visit her. So she took the opportunity to stay here as a bodyguard, solving the problem of the lack of high-end martial forces in the palace. These years, the cooperation between Song Qingshu and Ren Wuxing went deep into many aspects. In addition, the Prince of Qi's team in Lin and was basically formed by the people of the Sun Moon sect, so the relationship between the two parties had become the closest of allies. There was no harm in revealing some appropriate secrets to him. Originally, Ren Wuxing was very unhappy when he came to Lin. After all, Ren Ying was his only daughter. In the end, his son-in-law was a womanizer who married two princesses in front of his daughter. Ren Wuxing even considered teaching this son-in-law a good lesson, but after considering the difference in strength between them, he instantly gave up the idea. However, the dissatisfaction in his heart remained until he came to Lin and found out that the other party had actually controlled an entire country. Ren Wuxing originally had a great desire for power, otherwise he wouldn't have plotted to unify the martial arts world. However, after he came to Lin, he found that his son-in-law was only one step away from becoming the emperor. Instantly, he felt that the martial arts world was just a small fight. Before, no matter how high Song Qingshu's martial arts were, he was a bit indignant for his daughter. However, once he knew that the other party could really become the emperor, all the dissatisfaction suddenly disappeared. Being an imperial concubine, or even an empress, would make him much more glorious than being a concubine. Therefore, when he heard his daughter's request, he readily agreed and even handled the government affairs more actively than Ren Ying. After arranging everything after he left, Song Qingshu knew that it was time to go to Xixia to find spouse. However, he was faced with a problem now. Ren Ying disguised herself as him and stayed in Lin, and so he couldn't show up in public. Of course, for Xixia, they couldn't publicly marry a man who had many wives. Therefore, it was not too big a problem for Song Qingshu to not use his identity. However, this created a problem. That was, with what identity should he participate in the marriage selection in Xixia? After all, Li Qinglu was already his woman. He didn't want her to really be taken by another man. Even if he secretly manipulated the selection process to prevent the Mongolian prince from succeeding, there would still be a winner in the end. Therefore, after thinking about it for a long time, he could only become a candidate for the marriage selection in order to ensure that he could win the beauty. To enter the marriage selection in Xixia, the candidates were either princes or magnates. Moreover, Song Qingshu couldn't use his own identity, which gave him a great headache. Finally, Li Qingluo's proposal made him suddenly see the light. That was to pretend to be Jia Baoyu. First of all, Jia Baoyu was dead. Only he and Zhou Zhiruan knew about it. Everyone else only knew that Jia Baoyu was missing. Second, he had once pretended to be Jia Baoyu, so it was not difficult for him to resume his old business. Jia Baoyu's identity was noble, so he was indeed qualified to participate in the marriage selection in Xixia. Most importantly, after Jia Shidao died, Jia Baoyu was theoretically the heir of the Jia family. The huge Jia's group had been silent during this time. After all, it was like a group of dragons without a leader, so they had to stay dormant for a while. However, this didn't mean that the crisis had been eliminated. Sooner or later, these people would break out. Once Jia Baoyu returned to the Jia family as the heir, he would naturally be able to call on his trusted subordinates who were still loyal to Jia Shidao. People of the Jia's group, hiding everywhere, would surround him. Sure, Miyuan and Shui Ji might want to cooperate with him if they wanted to do anything. In this way, Song Qingshu could know the enemy's overall plan in advance. At that time, it would be difficult for him to lose. It suddenly feels a little sinister. Looking at the smile on the face of the playboy in the mirror, Song Qingshu couldn't help but complain. After all, it would take a few days to prepare after returning to the Jia family. It was impossible to immediately set off to Xixia for the marriage selection. Therefore, after making this plan, Song Qingshu immediately disguised himself as Jia Baoyu so that he could set off to Xixia as soon as possible. When Song Qingshu appeared at the gate of the Jia family, the gatekeeper looked at him incredulously. Then, he ran back to the family like a madman to report, Second Master Bao is back. Second Master Bao is back. The entire Rongwa mansion and the Ningwa mansion next to it were all boiling. During this time, it could be said that the Jia family had experienced a transformation from heaven to hell. Several family masters had died on Wutang Mountain, and Jia Fei had been deposed to the Cold Palace. Although the Jia family's glory was not reduced in name, everyone felt like a building was about to collapse. Jia Shidao was not the only one who died on Wutang Mountain. Jia Jing and Jia Shi, the most important men in the mansion, had also died. Now, the Rongwa mansion and the Ningwa mansion had more women than men. The remaining branches were also fighting openly and secretly for the position of the family master. Now that Jia Baoyu, the most legitimate heir, had returned, it was like a shot of adrenaline for everyone in the Jia family. The madams and maids of the branches all came out to see her. The previously lifeless Jia family was instantly revitalized. Looking at the courtyard full of women, Song Qingshu couldn't help but look weird because he thought of Li Qingluo's suggestion. The reason why the four families are so difficult to deal with is that they have been united over the years. If you can break up their relationship, it will be easy for you to defeat them one by one. There are the madams and ladies of several families in the Grand View Garden. If you use Jia Baoyu's identity to do something, you can probably make several families turn against each other. Chapter 2074. Song Qingshu shook his head and banished this thought from his mind. He thought that Li Qingluo was indeed the holy mother of the White Lotus Society, and she was also from the Carefree sect. There was always some evil in her, and this move of hers was really too vicious. However, he had to admit that her idea was very targeted. If it was carried out, it would be a piece of cake to divide the Jia, Shi, Wang, and Shui families. But it's too despicable. Song Qingshu couldn't bring himself to do such a thing. Second Master Bao. It really is Second Master Bao. A few pretty maids ran over. When they saw him, they all burst into tears. Song Qingshu had pretended to be Jia Baoyu once, so he naturally recognized them as his maids. Shiren, Qingwen, Xia, and Xiaowen. A few maidservants were chattering and jumping around him. Song Qing-shu answered their questions one by one, not revealing any flaws. "My darling, where did you run off to?" Not long after, an old lady ran over. Before she even reached him, she opened her arms to hug him. Song Qing-shu knew that she was Mrs. Jia, who loved Jia Baoyu the most. He quickly went up to her and held her. "Ancestor, don't fall." Mrs. Jia hugged him tightly and called out to him as if she was her darling. Noticing her tears and feeling her sincere concern, Song Qing-shu sighed. If she knew that Jia Baoyu had died a long time ago and that her son, Jia Sherdao, had died because of him, he wondered if she would break down. After all, she was an innocent old lady. Song Qing-shu secretly made up his mind not to let her know the truth and continue to live happily as before. "Where have you been all this time? Everyone's been so worried." Mrs. Wang was also a little emotional, but she couldn't help but scold him. "What do you mean by dead? It's inauspicious." Mrs. Jia turned around and glared at her. "You're right, Mrs. Wang." Mrs. Wang sighed and looked a little worried. "It's a long story." Song Qing-shu swept his gaze around. The people in the Jia residence all appeared to be extremely happy on the surface. However, with his experience, how could he not distinguish the complicated emotions contained in some people's eyes? It seems that not everyone in the Jia residence welcomes Jia Baoyu's return. Song Qing-shu thought to himself. "Let's go. Come to my place and tell me slowly." Mrs. Jia dragged him to her yard. The others had many questions, but they didn't dare to fight with the old lady. So they could only watch them leave. When they arrived at Mrs. Jia's yard, Song Qing-shu told them the reason he had already thought of. "I was captured by the Mongolians, and I finally found a chance to escape." Hearing this, Lady Jia's heart jumped. She could not help cursing. "Why did those damned Mongolian Tartars capture you?" "Maybe he wants to use me as a hostage," Song Qing-shu replied. "Our family has been through a lot in the past 2 years. We finally waited for you to come back, but your father is gone." Mrs. Jia was sad and kept wiping her tears. Her daughters-in-law, young ladies, and maids tried to comfort her. "What happened to my father?" Song Qing-shu acted as if he didn't know what had happened to Jia Sherdao. "Your father tried to protect the emperor in Wutang Mountain, but he was... Mrs. Jia cried, and the other old and weak women and children in the room also cried. Song Qing-shu also put himself in the shoes of the real Jia Baoyu, thinking about how the real Jia Baoyu would react as he imitated it. Everyone in the house cried for a long time, but Mrs. Jia was the first to sober up. "You must have suffered a lot during this period of turmoil. Shirin, take Baoyu back to the Yihong courtyard to freshen up, change your clothes, and wash away the bad luck on your body. Then we'll eat together." "Yes, old lady." Shirin and the others bowed and came to Song Qing-shu. "I'll come back later to pay my respects to the ancestor." Song Qing-shu also stood up and said goodbye. He had to pretend to be someone who had escaped, so his clothes looked a bit ragged. At the same time, he secretly complained about Jia Baoyu's taste. She named her yard Yihong Yard and called herself Mr. Yihong, which sounded like a prostitute and a rapist. After Song Qing-shu left, the other ladies talked with Mrs. Jia for a while and then went back to their rooms. When Wang Shifeng returned to her house, Zhao Yin was already pacing back and forth in the room. Seeing his wife come back, he said, "I heard Baoyu is back. I'm afraid the people next door already know that he's back." Wang Shifeng nodded seriously. "Are you sure it's him?" Zhao Yin asked. "I think so." Wang Shifeng wasn't sure. "Judging from his appearance and his conversation with the ancestor, I can't see anything wrong with him. Why did he come back at this time?" Zhao Yin's expression was a bit fierce. "I was about to inherit the title of Rongwa Mansion, but he came back at this time." Wang Shifeng hurriedly opened the door and looked around for a while. Seeing that no one was around, she let out a sigh of relief. After closing the door, she scolded her husband. "Are you crazy? If the ancestor heard this, it would be terrible. What are you afraid of? There's nothing left anyway." Zhao Yin was a bit lost. Jia Baoyu has been missing for so long. The ancestor used all his connections, but he couldn't find him. Everyone thought he died outside. Why'd he come back safe and sound? In the official announcement, Jia Shidao died protecting the emperor. In order to reward his behavior, he was posthumously conferred the title of king. Of course, such a title couldn't be inherited, but his title of Duke Ronghua could be passed down. Jia Shidao's eldest son, Jia Zhu, died many years ago. He only left a widowed wife, Li Wan, and no children. His second son, Jia Baoyu, hadn't married yet, so he didn't have any children. Now that he was missing, Jiao Yin naturally became the first heir. But as soon as Jia Baoyu came back, everything was ruined. Wang Shifeng's expression suddenly changed. Do you think the one who came back is fake? Jiao Yin instantly became spirited. Fake? Wang Shifeng nodded. That's right. Master has been investigating for so long, but he couldn't find any trace of him. He even suspected that we were the culprits. Doesn't this prove that Master also thinks that Baoyu is no longer alive? Recalling that period of anxiety, Jiao Yin gradually came to a realization. That's right. If Master didn't have enough information, he definitely wouldn't have thought that he was dead. Jiao Yin suddenly thought of something and suddenly became discouraged. Didn't you just say that he behaved exactly like Baoyu? Wang Shifeng didn't know if she saw hope, but a smile appeared on her gorgeous face. That's only on the surface. The world is so big, and it's not impossible to have exactly the same people. If someone taught him some of Jia Baoyu's habits and various situations in the Jia mansion, it wouldn't be difficult for him to impersonate. Jiao Yin instantly became spirited. But how can we prove that he is a fake? Wang Shifeng looked in the direction of the Yihong courtyard. If he impersonates, it's the hardest to fool the people around him. Shirin, that girl, has already eaten the forbidden fruit with Baoyu. Besides, the maids in the Yihong courtyard are the most familiar with him. He can fool the old lady, but he may not be able to fool Shirin and the others. But they're just maids after all. What if they are threatened and don't dare to report him? Jiao Yin's mind was unprecedentedly meticulous when it came to his title. Wang Shifeng frowned and suddenly came up with an idea. Then I'll do it myself. You? Looking at his wife's confident look, Jiao Yin was puzzled. A blush flashed across Wang Shifeng's face. She explained, I can go to him in private and pretend to have had an affair with him. If the other party is a fake, he will definitely follow my words. At that time, it will naturally prove that he is a fake. It's best to let the old lady and the others see the scene of that person flirting with me. Even if he is real, his reputation will be ruined. That's a great idea. Jiao Yin was overjoyed, but after the excitement, he felt that something was wrong. He looked at his beautiful wife suspiciously. Did you really have something with Baoyu before? Chapter 2075. Wang Shifeng's eyes widened as she scolded. I sleep with a bunch of scoundrels every day, and my mind is full of dirty things. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have risked my reputation to do such a despicable thing. In the end, you just had to make yourself a cuckold. Jiao Yin was a little afraid of his wife, so he immediately smiled and said, It's my fault. My wife is as pure as ice and as clean as jade. My brother is upright and doesn't lust after women. I, Jiao Yin, have never been cuckolded by anyone. Bah! Wang Shifeng was obviously annoyed by her husband's shamelessness. I don't care about other things, but your brother doesn't lust after women. How dare you say that? Jiao Yin, couldn't help but laugh when he thought of his brother's reputation. But then he suddenly thought of Bao's special hobbies. There were so many lovely girls in the house, but he only touched Shirin. He spent most of his energy looking for married women. Looking at his beautiful wife, Jiao Yin couldn't help but touch the hat on his head. It should be nothing. It should be nothing. When Song Qingshu returned to the Yihong courtyard, he was acting with Shirin, Qingwen, and the other sisters. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat, and he raised his head to look in the direction of the main room. A middle-aged scholar was pacing back and forth in the room, obviously very anxious. Mr. Liao. Shirin and Qingwen obviously recognized him, and they bowed respectfully when they saw him. Liao Yingzhong. Song Qingshu immediately recognized him. He was Jia Shidao's chief advisor. He had been a jinshi in his early years, and the imperial court appointed him as a zhizhou, but he didn't go. Instead, he chose to work for Jia Sherdao. The Shirkai Hall was built by him. On the surface, it was a colorful bookstore, but in fact, it was an intelligence agency with many masters. It had almost all of Jia Sherdao's resources. Liao Yingzhong hadn't been with Jia Sherdao during the last trip to the Wudong sect. Obviously, he had been left to guard the capital. "You can leave now. I have something to say to young master." Liao Yingzhong waved his hand, signaling the others to leave. Yes. The reaction of Shirin and Qingwen proved that Liao Yingzhong had a high status in the Jia Mansion. He often went in and out of the Jia Mansion, so he could absolutely command the servants. Song Qingshu of his heart was in his throat. The most difficult test had come. Liao Yingzhong was Jia Sherdao's #1 confidant, and he was also in charge of the intelligence agency. It wouldn't be so easy to fool him. After the others retreated, Liao Yingzhong sized up Song Qingshu coldly without saying a word. Song Qingshu also decided to deal with all changes by remaining unchanged. The two of them stared at each other for a while before Liao Yingzhong finally spoke. His voice was filled with coldness and killing intent. "Who are you? Why are you pretending to be my young master?" Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat, but he had experienced too many storms, so he quickly realized that the other party was probably bluffing him. He hurriedly pretended to be confused and looked at the other party. "Mr. Liao, what are you talking about?" Liao Yingzhong sneered. "You can hide it from the old madam and the others, but you can't hide it from me. The real young master is already dead, so how can you be the young master? Who are you?" Song Qingshu's heart sank. He couldn't be this unlucky, could he? Could he be the mastermind behind Jia Baoyu's assassination on the Isle of Heroes? No, that's impossible. Jia Sherdao was so cunning that he wouldn't have chosen such a traitor as his top confidant. Even if he really was the mastermind behind the assassination, he wouldn't have known that Jia Baoyu was dead. Back then, only he and Zhou Zhiruo had witnessed the scene. He had even used the corpse-dissolving powder to turn Jia Baoyu into nothingness, leaving no trace of his existence in this world. Without a corpse to confirm, even if the other party was really the mastermind, they would at most know that Jia Baoyu was missing, but they would not be able to confirm his death. After understanding all this, Song Qingshu continued to maintain the previous tone. "I'm Baoyu. Mr. Liao, why are you acting weird today?" Liao Yingzhong frowned and observed his face carefully, but he couldn't find any flaws. He knew that there were disguise skills in Jianghu, but he had never heard of anyone who could disguise themselves so flawlessly. Even their height and body shape were exactly the same. His doubt was resolved, but he didn't believe it so easily. He asked, "Tell me, where have you been?" "I was caught by the Ryong Mansion." Song Qingshu described how he had met the Mongolian delegation when he left Linan. He had pretended to be Jia Baoyu and witnessed the whole process. That was why he described some details very clearly. It really was the Ryong Mansion, Liao Yingzhong said with hatred. Song Qingshu secretly let out a sigh of relief. The reason why he chose the Ryong Mansion to be the scapegoat was that Jia Sherdao had turned the Central Plains upside down. With his power in the court and the intelligence network of the Isle of Heroes, it was impossible for him not to find Jia Baoyu. Therefore, he began to suspect that it was the Mongolian delegation, which was beyond his reach. Before, Jia Sherdao had invited Song Qingshu to his mansion for a banquet, and he had revealed his intention to ask for help. After all, Song Qingshu had a good relationship with the Ryong Mansion, and everyone knew it. Of course, on the Wutang Mountain, Jia Sherdao had witnessed what Jia Sherdao said when he watched Island Master Mu Jia she be killed. At the same time, Song Qingshu also suspected that Jia Sherdao was behind it. Therefore, he had planned to claim that Jia Sherdao had secretly imprisoned him. However, he gave up the idea in the end. After all, Jia Sherdao's activities were only in Lin and in the Isle of Heroes. It would be easy for Liao Yingzhong to find out where Jia Sherdao was imprisoned. In comparison, the Mongolians were far away, and they were far away from Jia Sherdao's sphere of influence. Even if Liao Yingzhong wanted to find out, he wouldn't know where to start. "Why did the Ryong Mansion arrest you?" Liao Yingzhong was a little confused. In his opinion, the Mongolians had arrested Jia Baoyu because they wanted to use the young master to threaten the Lord. However, the Mongolians hadn't sent anyone to talk about it recently, so there was no way they could threaten him. So, why did they arrest him for no reason? I don't know. Song Qingshu had thought of a few reasons, but he decided not to say them when it came down to it. When facing an old fox like Liao Yingzhong, it was better to let him think of the reasons himself than to tell him himself. It would be more convincing. Is it to be a pawn in the future? As expected, Liao Yingzhong began to imagine. The Mongolians hadn't officially gone south yet. In the future, when they went against the southern Song dynasty, Jia Baoyu would be a very useful bargaining chip. He could use it to threaten Jia Sherdao to cede national interests, but now that his lord was dead, Liao Yingzhong quickly stopped thinking about it. He continued to stare at him and asked, "Since you were imprisoned in the Ruyang mansion, where there are many masters, and it's thousands of miles away from the Central Plains, how did you escape?" Song Qingshu had already thought of an excuse. "I don't know what's going on either. Something seems to have happened in Ruyang Prince's mansion recently. Everyone in the mansion is in a state of unrest, and the guards are getting fewer and fewer. Later on, I found an opportunity and escaped. It seems like they didn't send anyone after me." Zhao Min had rushed back to Mongolia earlier, so it was obvious that something had happened in the Ruyang mansion. It was reasonable for him to contact her like this. Liao Yingzhong nodded slightly. The conflict between the Prince of Ruyang and Temujin has intensified recently. There are rumors that Temujin wants to take away the military power of the Prince of Ruyang. No wonder they don't care about you. Although the power of the Shirkai Hall couldn't reach Mongolia, it wasn't hard to find this information. Song Qingshu was shocked. He had just said it casually. He didn't expect that something had really happened in the Ruyang mansion. He didn't know if Zhao Min was safe there. Chapter 2076. After asking him so many questions, Liao Yingzhong's doubts were mostly gone. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, young master. Now is a special time. I was worried that someone with ulterior motives would pretend to be young master, so I tested you on purpose. If I offended you, please forgive me." Song Qingshu hurriedly helped him up. "Mr. Liao is very thoughtful. I can't even begin to admire you. How can I blame you?" Liao Yingzhong looked at him in surprise. "I haven't seen you for a long time. You seem to have grown a lot." Song Qingshu knew that his behavior and habits would inevitably be different from the previous Jia Baoyu, but he had already thought of an excuse. "I was captured by the people of Ruyang Mansion during this period of time, and I went from being a superior person to a prisoner. The huge contrast made me start thinking, and I gradually realized that I was too reckless in the past." Liao Yingzhong couldn't help but sigh. If the Prime Minister was still here, he would be very happy to see you so mature. Song Qingshu also revealed a mournful expression. "It's a pity that he won't be able to return." Liao Yingzhong asked, "Young master, do you know what happened in Wutang Mountain?" Of course, Song Qingshu knew. However, he still answered according to what he had heard in the manner. "Previously, the old mistress told me that the old man had unfortunately sacrificed his life to save the emperor's family. The emperor was kind and generous. He was conferred the title of prince and was rewarded generously to the Jia clan." Liao Yingzhong's expression changed. Finally, he said, "This is just a story to fool the people. Prime Minister Jia is an outstanding man. Even if he wanted to protect the emperor, he wouldn't risk his life." Song Qingshu pretended not to know and asked, "Are you saying that there is a secret behind his death?" Liao Yingzhong didn't answer immediately. Instead, he got up and looked around at the door. After confirming that there was no one around, he closed the door again and whispered, "Young master, what I'm going to say next is a disaster that will lead to the extermination of your family. You must not leak any of it." Song Qingshu pretended to be afraid. "You can't even tell the old lady?" "No." Liao Yingzhong looked at him closely. "You can choose now. Listen or not." Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment and then said, "Okay, I want to know the truth." Liao Yingzhong nodded his head in relief. "Prime Minister Jia will be very happy to know this in the afterlife." After a pause, he continued, Prime Minister Jia has been planning something big. This matter is too dangerous, so only a few people know about it. In order to prevent the old lady from worrying, I didn't tell her. Then, he briefly explained Jia Shidao's plan. Song Qingshu was obviously shocked. What? He's going to rebel? Liao Yingzhong frowned. Apparently, he found the word rebellion a little harsh. He coughed and explained, nobles, marquises, and generals all have guts. Our dynasty's Taizu also seized the throne by bullying orphans and widows. Why can't we seize them? Song Qingshu nodded and comforted. Bao Yu is being pedantic. Liao Yingzhong continued. Prime Minister Jia had planned everything, and he was also a hidden great guru. In our eyes, he was a sure winner. Even if he failed, with his current power and martial arts, he could retreat unscathed. But he failed and died on Wu-Tang Mountain. Song Qingshu knew the answer, but he still asked, what happened on Wu-Tang Mountain? Liao Yingzhong shook his head. No one knows. Almost everyone who went up the mountain died. But to be sure, it must have something to do with Song Qingshu. Hearing his name, Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. In the end, he had become the scapegoat. However, although Jia Shidao didn't die by his hand, it didn't make much of a difference. Prime Minister Jia was a little afraid of Song Qingshu, so he deliberately encouraged the Redcoat Army to attack Yangzhou. He also sent Lu Gu, the Huaidong Control Commissioner, to monitor him with 30,000 elite soldiers. He thought he could stall him for a few months, but he solved the problem in Yangzhou so quickly and successfully went to Wu-Tang Mountain, which is thousands of miles away. Liao Yingzhong's tone was full of amazement. Although we are enemies, I can't help but admire him. If I hadn't met Prime Minister Jia first, maybe I would have joined him. Hearing Liao Yingzhong praise him like that, Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel a little proud. Of course, he didn't take Liao Yingzhong's last sentence to heart. Once such a person chose a master, it would be impossible for him to change his master. Not to mention that Jia Shidao had basically died because of him, so it was even more impossible to recruit him. After a while, Liao Yingzhong said, I said all this because I want you to know how terrifying our enemy is and that you can't let a guard down. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. Now that he has power in the court and his martial arts are high, how can we take revenge? Don't be discouraged, master, Liao Yingzhong replied. Although Song Qingshu's martial arts are high, in the court and the fight for power, martial arts are not very useful. Back then, Go Jian, the king of Yu, took 10 years to give birth and 10 years to educate him. In the end, he finally took revenge. We can do the same. Song Qingshu secretly frowned. He wondered if he should get rid of Liao Yingzhong, just in case there was a venomous snake in the dark that was always staring at him. Do you have any good ideas, sir? Song Qingshu decided to sound him out first so that he could be prepared in advance. Liao Yingzhong sighed and said, in the Battle of Wudang, the Isle of Heroes army was almost wiped out and the other elites were all killed. The Jia family's power is now much weaker than before, so we need to seek outside help. Outside help? Song Qingshu was stunned. Liao Yingzhong nodded and said, previously, the Shi family and the Shui family's factions caused trouble in the court several times. It was obvious that Song Qingshu's appearance had damaged the interests of their two families. In addition, our families have always been on the same side, so they are our natural allies. Song Qingshu frowned and said, however, they have many informants. The true situation of the Battle of Wudang may not be hidden from them. When that time comes, it is very likely that they will draw a line between themselves and the Jia family. That is indeed a possibility. Liao Yingzhong was somewhat gratified that Jia Baoyu's eyes were now so sharp that he could find the crux of the matter at a glance. That is why we need young master to take action. Me? Song Qingshu was a little confused. Liao Yingzhong revealed a strange expression and said, if you don't want the Shi family and the Shui family to draw a line between themselves, then you have to make them one family. This is what young master is good at. Sir, please don't keep us guessing. What is going on? The more Song Qingshu listened, the more confused he became. Young master, you've always been good at winning the hearts of girls. It just so happens that the Sher family and the Shui family both have pearls in their palms. If you can win their hearts, there's no need to worry that the two families cannot become one. Liao Yingzhong also felt that it was very strange. He had always prided himself on being knowledgeable, but he did not expect that he would come up with such a bad idea. Song Qingshu's eyes widened. He did not expect that when Li Qingluo had urged him to seduce those young ladies, even Liao Yingzhong had come up with the same idea when he arrived at the Jia family. Of course, there was still a difference between the two people's goals. One was to make him a scumbag and take the opportunity to anger the other two families. The other was to make him win the hearts of the two young ladies and marry them openly. But I like Sister Lin more. Song Qingshu remembered his identity and still had to show his attitude. Liao Yingzhong shook his head and said, "If the Prime Minister was still here, young master can marry whoever you like. You don't have to worry too much. But now it is different. You have the family's honor and disgrace on your shoulders, as well as the Prime Minister's unfulfilled wish. You can't do things according to your whims. Although the Lin family is not bad, it is still not as good as the Sher family and the Shui family." Hearing his evaluation, Song Qingshu nodded secretly. Lin Rahai used to be the salt and iron envoy. Later, Han Qingzhou fell from power. Under Jia Shidao's manipulation, he was now the Minister of Planning, and his status was no lower than that of the Minister of State. The most important problem was that Lin Rahai had gotten his position because of Jia Shidao. Now that Jia Shidao was dead, his position might not be stable. At the same time, the Lin family was small, and compared to the flourishing Sher family and the Shui family, it was still not as powerful. Understand, Song Qingshu was not the real Jia Baoyu, so he would not hold on to his sister Lin. Seeing that he agreed, Liao Yingzhong liked him even more. He thought that although young master had suffered a lot this time, it might not be a bad thing now. The young lady of a Sher family would have been the best candidate. After all, the Sher family is stronger. But the problem is that the young lady of the Sher family seems to have a fiancé. I'm afraid it will be impossible to get her. Song Qingshu knew that the fiancé he was talking about was Shi Shangyun. Speaking of which, he had a history with Shi Shangyun and Wei Ruolin. Liao Yingzhong didn't know that his mind was wandering, so he continued, "In comparison, the young lady of the Shui family is easier, but she grew up in a place like the Imperial City Department, so she must be a powerful person. I'm afraid you will have to suffer in the future." Shui Baochai's tender and beautiful face appeared in Song Qingshu's mind. He thought that Liao Yingzhong's evaluation was quite accurate. Although she looked dignified and virtuous on the outside, how could a woman from the Imperial City Department be a simple character? Young master is handsome and naturally liked by women. So if you go all out to pursue her, the possibility of success is still very high. Liao Yingzhong obviously thought that young master would definitely be able to get Shui Baochai. As for Shi Shangyun, it was not impossible. As for Lin Daiyu, it was already in the bag. Song Qingshu wanted to take this opportunity to find out the truth of the Jia family's organization. "Oh yes, sir. Who else do we have that we can use? It's better to be prepared," Liao Yingzhong said with some sadness. Originally, with the power that the Prime Minister built, there was no need to rely on young master to sell his man. Hearing the words "sell his man," Song Qingshu's expression suddenly became very interesting. It's just that after the Prime Minister's death, some people have become disloyal, which led to the internal division of the organization. So we have to trouble young master to rope in the Sher family and the Shui family. Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows. Oh, who else is disloyal? He thought that he could make use of this opportunity to rope in some people. Liao Yingzhong answered, "Didn't I tell young master that the forces of the Island of Heroes were almost completely wiped out in the Battle of Mount Wudong? Actually, the Island of Heroes still has a few people left." Hearing him mention the Island of Heroes, Song Qingshu instantly became spirited. The Island of Heroes had always been very mysterious. Even he, who had been to the Island of Heroes before, still did not know many things. First is Wu Lu. This person became the commander of the Guangdong Navy with the help of the Prime Minister. In the end, something happened to the prime minister, so his attitude became subtle. Liao Yingzhong's voice was cold. It was obvious that he was full of dissatisfaction. Wu Luqi. Song Qingshu nodded to himself. He knew that the other party did not really want to join the Island of Heroes in the first place. This choice was no exception. Liao Yingzhong continued. Next is Zhao De and Qian Er. Song Qingshu immediately sat up straight. The most mysterious person of the Island of Heroes was not the second island master of Dragonwood. Instead, it was the two envoys in front of Zhang San and Li Si. It felt like they were very elusive, as if they had never shown their faces. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2077. Qian Er is fine, but Zhao De is a piece of sh*t. Liao Yingzhong gritted his teeth. He obviously hated Zhao De to the core. Why? Song Qingshu did not blindly ask who Zhao De Qianer was. Zhao Baiyu had been to the Island of Heroes before, and based on the situation back then, it was not the first or second time. It was very likely that he knew Zhao De Qianer's identity. If Song Qingshu asked, wouldn't he be exposed? Liao Yingzhong hesitated, then explained, now that the Prime Minister is dead, and you are about to become the master of the Jia family, there are some secrets that I should tell you. He took a sip of tea to moisten his throat, then continued. The Prime Minister established the Island of Heroes for two reasons. On the one hand, he recruited people with special abilities from the Jianghu, and, on the other hand, he recruited the children of some ministers in the court for future events. Song Qingshu couldn't help but admire Jia Shidao's foresight. He had used the Island of Heroes to tie all the officials and generals in the court to him. No wonder his power had grown so fast that even Zhao Go felt he couldn't stop it, so he had to use the strategy of self-destruction. Of course, in the beginning, he recruited the children of the branch families that weren't valued. Liao Yingzhong smiled bitterly. After all, the direct descendants with a bright future wouldn't participate in this kind of bloodshed. Only the branch families that had never been able to make a name for themselves and were treated poorly would have enough ambition and motivation. Song Qingshu nodded. Although the aristocratic families in this world weren't as powerful as they were in the Wei and Jin dynasties, they still shouldn't be underestimated. A family often had many branches and a large population, but the family's resources were limited. Only the direct descendants had the opportunity to make a name for themselves, and the children of the other families lived in terrible conditions. Seeing that their brothers weren't as capable as they were, but they could inherit the title in the future and have a meteoric rise, many people would feel resentful. Liao Yingzhong continued, Zhao De and Qian Er are the highest in status among these people. Qian Er is the son of Qian Xiangzu, Qian Yun. His motive for joining the Island of Heroes is a bit different from the others. How do I put it? He's a bit of a Buddhist, unlike the others. Buddhist? Then why did he join the Island of Heroes? Song Qingshu was thinking that Qian Xiangzu was the son of Qian Xiangzu. No wonder Qian Xiangzu and Jia Shidao seemed to have a good relationship in the court. Liao Yingzhong replied. It is very likely that he received his father's permission to join the Isle of Heroes. Perhaps Qian Xiangzu did not want to offend Prime Minister, so he used this opportunity to sell himself to Prime Minister. After all, since the Taizu dynasty, the Qian family has always been neutral and even a little slippery. If someone told me that he also placed a bet on Han Xingzhou, I wouldn't be surprised. Song Qingshu nodded in agreement. In the early years of the Northern Song dynasty, the country was strong and powerful. King Qianti of Wuyue had to surrender. Perhaps from the perspective of that time, Zhao Kuangyin was the victor, but in reality, it was not necessarily so. The Qian family had always prospered and had many talented descendants. Qian Xiangzu had even become the prime minister of the Song dynasty. What was even more amazing was that even after 1,000 years, when Zhao Kuangyin's descendants had long disappeared and the Song dynasty had become a thing of the past, the Qian family had survived. In later generations, they were still a top-notch noble family and had even produced world-famous legendary figures. To be able to do all of this, the teachings of their family must be extraordinary. At this time, Liao Yingzhong also said, "At first, we suspected that Qian Yun had the intention of reviving the Wu Yue kingdom, but after some contact, we found that he was not such a person. In the end, Prime Minister and I both believed that he was only sent to the Isle of Heroes by the Qian family to protect himself." Song Qingshu trusted Jia Sherdao and Liao Yingzhong's judgment. People like them had been in contact with each other day and night, so it was impossible for them to be wrong about one person at the same time. On the contrary, Liao Yingzhong sneered and said, "He is very ambitious." Song Qingshu thought to himself, "Can't you just say it all at once? It's not a crosstalk, and you need me to keep supporting you." However, he was also very curious about it. So even though he was a little dissatisfied, he still said, "Why do you say that? By the way, let me remind you, young master." Liao Yingzhong seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly said, "Young master has always been a good friend of Queen Beijing, but from now on, you should be more careful and be more vigilant." Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. "So Liao Yingzhong nodded and said, "That's right. Zhao De is the current Queen Beijing, Zhao Shicheng." Song Qingshu suddenly understood. When he and Lu Yu met him and Tang Wan in the Shun Garden, he noticed that they had martial arts, so he had been suspicious. Later, in order to determine the ownership of the military power of Sichuan, the imperial court decided to let Wu Shi and Murong Fu compete in front of the palace. The night before the competition, Queen Beijing invited Wu Shi to the palace and secretly did something to ensure that Murong Fu would win the competition. If Song Qingshu hadn't pretended to be Wu Shi at that time, they would have probably succeeded. No wonder it was Jia Sherdao's matter, but Queen Beijing came forward at that time. It turned out that he was Zhao De of the Isle of Heroes. Liao Yingzhong continued to say, "After the Prime Minister's accident, I immediately invited him to discuss it, but he kept refusing. I guess he consciously drew a line with us, worried that the Wudang incident would involve him. That's human nature." Song Qingshu thought that Jia Sherdao died to protect the emperor, which could only fool the ordinary people, but those well-informed high-level people who couldn't guess a thing or two. Hearing what he said, Liao Yingzhong was so excited that he slammed the table heavily. If he just wanted to protect himself, it would be fine, but he secretly began to draw the forces that the Prime Minister had painstakingly built up. In addition to me, there are a few very important people under the Prime Minister's command. I, Wang Yinglong, and the palace are the strategists. Pan Wenqing, Ji Ku, Chun Jian, Su Qing's son, and others are the henchmen. Except for Chun Jian, who followed the Prime Minister to the Wudang Mountain and died in the battle, most of the others have been secretly drawn by Zhao De. Only a few are still barely neutral. It's a pity that we suffered heavy losses in the Wudang battle. Otherwise, we would have definitely killed these traitors. Song Qingshu secretly remembered these names in his heart and planned to find a chance to quietly get rid of them in the future. He asked, "What does Queen Beijing want to do by secretly gathering so many forces?" "What else?" Liao Yingzhong sneered. "Zhao Shicheng is the son of Emperor Taizong's great-great-grandson, Zhao Zhongming, and the grandnephew of Emperor Renzong's 10th daughter, great elder princess of Qinlu. Now that the emperor has no heir as a member of the royal family, he naturally has thoughts about that position. Mr. Liao, later, Madame will invite the young master to have dinner with her. Now there's not much time, and we have to help him wash and change clothes." At this time, Shiren's voice came from outside the door. Liao Yingzhong frowned and finally agreed. "Well, I'll leave the young master to you." Then he bowed to Song Qingshu and said, "The young master must be tired after going through so many dangers. Take a good rest today, and we'll talk to the young master tomorrow." Outside the door, Liao Yingzhong pulled Shiren and whispered in her ear, "Miss Hua, I know that you and the young master are very close. Later when you help him bathe and change clothes, check his body carefully." Shiren frowned slightly. "Are you suspicious?" Liao Yingzhong said in a low voice, "Although I've already tested him, I'm not as familiar with the young master as the people in this room. It's better to be careful." "Calm, Miao Shu Wu." Chapter 2078. Her voice was very light, but Song Qingshu's cultivation could not be hidden from Shiren. Hearing that she asked Shiren to check his body, Song Qingshu could not help but frown. When he pretended to be Jia Baoyu for the first time, he was most afraid of Shiren's maids. They had served Jia Baoyu since he was a child and were close to him all day long. They were definitely more familiar with Jia Baoyu than Mrs. Wang and Mrs. Jia. In particular, Shiren had already been taken into Jia Baoyu's room, so she couldn't be more familiar with her master's body. Although Song Qingshu had disguised himself like Jia Baoyu and even changed his figure with the clavicle technique in the Nining Sutra, his skin and some details of his body couldn't be the same. Shiren had always been careful, so she would probably find something unusual. In fact, Song Qingshu had faced the same trouble last time, but he had an affair with a concubine soon after he entered the palace. Jia Sherdao was so scared that he hurriedly sent him out of linen. Then he took the opportunity to restore his identity. Jia Baoyu also disappeared from then on, so he naturally didn't need to face the investigation of Shiren and the other maids. Originally, getting rid of Shiren was the simplest method. However, first, it would easily arouse suspicion. Second, it was not in line with Song Qingshu's temperament. He was a person who valued the lives of ordinary people. It was impossible for him to kill an innocent maidservant for his own selfish reasons. While he was thinking, Shiren pushed the door open with a smile and said, "Master, the hot water is ready. I will help you bathe and change your clothes." Song Qingshu replied subconsciously, "No, I can bathe myself." "How can you do that? We have always served you when you bathe." Thinking of what Liao Yingzhong had just said, Shiren's eyes were full of suspicion. "I have been used to being alone for a long time." Song Qingshu quickly found an excuse, but noticed that Shiren was still suspicious. He realized that if he continued to refuse, there would be more and more doubts. It was better to solve it as soon as possible. "Good sister, we haven't seen each other for a long time. I miss the feeling of being served by you." Song Qingshu remembered the doubts of the maids when he pretended to be Jia Baoyu for the first time. An idea came to him. He hugged Shiren and kissed her on the cheek. Well, the fragrance of the rouge is so fragrant. Seeing that he had regained his former lazy look, Shiren was not angry. Instead, she blushed and laughed. "Young master, don't make trouble. The old lady is still waiting for you." Song Qingshu raised his hands. "Then I'll have to trouble you, sister." Shiren spat in a low voice and removed his clothes one by one. However, when only his undergarments were left, she felt that it was inappropriate for her to stay there any longer. "Young master, please enter the bathtub first. I'll go get some new clothes." Song Qingshu was startled for a moment, but then he came to his senses. After all, a big family had its own rules. Moreover, there were other maids present, so Shiren did not dare to be too presumptuous. She still had to follow the family's etiquette. After entering the bathtub, Song Qingshu began to think about all kinds of unexpected situations that he might encounter. Although it was a little troublesome, his state of mind was very calm. With his current experience and cultivation, there was nothing in the world that could make him panic. After a while, Shiren came in with a set of clean clothes and closed the door behind her. Song Qingshu looked around her. "Hey, why did you come in alone?" Shiren smiled unnaturally. "They have other things to prepare." "Oh." Song Qingshu did not say anything more, but he was very clear in his heart. It was probably because Shiren said that he might be a fake, so those girls naturally did not dare to come over. "Let me massage young master's shoulders." Shiren put the clothes on the shelf aside and walked over with a smile. Song Qingshu did not refuse. "Okay." Shiren took a deep breath and walked behind Song Qingshu. She rolled up her sleeves and began to massage his shoulders. However, as soon as her fingertips touched his body, her face changed. "Young master seems to be much stronger." Jia Baoyu was a pampered child. His body was white and soft. However, the body of the person in front of her was as hard as a stone. Under the seemingly crystal and well-proportioned skin, no one knew how much explosive power was hidden. As soon as she said it, she regretted it. She should have told Mr. Liao directly. What if he killed her by saying it at this time? Song Qing-shu seemed not to notice her reaction. He replied casually, "Oh, during this time, I was under house arrest. I had nothing to do every day, so I began to practice the martial arts that the old man taught me. At first, I had no clue, but later, I seemed to have an epiphany. My body was getting better and better." Practice? Shirin was stunned. She couldn't tell whether it was true or not. Song Qing-shu continued to say at this time, "Otherwise, how could I escape? Don't tell anyone that I know martial arts. Last time, I was also assassinated by a mysterious person before I returned to the house. The old man has been investigating this matter, but I was captured by the Mongolians before he found out anything. I suspect that there's a traitor in the house. Otherwise, such things would not happen one after another. The Mongolians would not be able to know my whereabouts so clearly." A traitor? Shirin opened her small mouth widely. Song Qing-shu said yes. "Now in the house, I only trust you and the old lady. In order to avoid the old lady's worry, I didn't tell her. I only told you. You must not tell anyone else. Otherwise, if the traitor in the dark knows it, he will be more prepared to deal with me next time." "Okay, I won't leak a word." Shirin was just a servant girl in the mansion. All she had to deal with was the intrigue in the mansion. She had never seen such a dangerous thing before, so she was frightened into a daze. Suddenly, she thought of something and said hesitantly, "Could the traitor be Mr. Liao?" Song Qing-shu almost laughed out loud. This kind of little girl was really easy to fool. However, he didn't play along with her words. "It shouldn't be. Mr. Liao is the old master's confidant. Even if the whole world betrays him, he won't." Hearing that he was speaking for Liao Yingzhong, who suspected him, Shirin's doubts disappeared. She smiled again. "You are still so kind. Don't worry, everything will be fine." Noticing the sincerity in Shirin's tone, Song Qing-shu could feel that she was really good to Jia Baoyu. He didn't know if she knew about Jia Baoyu's special hobby. Thinking of Jia Baoyu's hobby, Song Qing-shu suddenly thought of himself. It seemed that he didn't have the right to criticize Jia Baoyu. He couldn't help but laugh awkwardly. "What are you laughing at?" Shirin asked curiously. "Nothing. I just found that you were getting more and more beautiful." Song Qing-shu patted the water. Come down and wash with me." "Young master." Shirin stamped her feet coquettishly. There was no longer any doubt in her heart. If he really had a guilty conscience, why would he ask her to go into the water with him? If they were intimate, wouldn't all secrets be exposed? Besides, wasn't this kind of indulgent request the second Master Bao's characteristic habit? "Young master, hurry up and wash. The old mistress is still waiting." However, she didn't dare to play in the water at a time like this. A whole family was waiting. If she acted so presumptuously and those people heard about it, she would probably be beaten to death. All right, Song Qing-shu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He had dealt with it for the time being. Anyway, he wouldn't be staying in the Jia Manor for long. If he was careful, Shirin and the other servant girls wouldn't find out anything. When he finished familiarizing himself and changed his clothes, he arrived at the Jia's mother's courtyard. He was surprised to find that there was already a large crowd of people inside. "Oh, your face is like the moon in mid-autumn, and your complexion is like the flowers in the dawn of spring. In this world, only our Baoyu has such an appearance that even women are envious of." Before he entered the door, he heard a familiar laugh. Song Qing-shu looked in the direction of the voice and saw a slender, beautiful woman with a coquettish figure. It was none other than Wang Shifeng. "Sister-in-law is teasing me again," Song Qing-shu responded. He couldn't help but think of the time when she knocked on his door in the middle of the night and proposed a deal. He couldn't help but feel excited. However, he knew that this was not the time to think about this. He quickly glanced around. Naturally, the leaders were the Jia's mother and Madame Wang. Next to them was Jia Zhen from the Ningguo Manor. However, her graceful daughter-in-law didn't come. The only man left was Wang Shifeng's husband, Jiao Yan. The Jia Manor had suffered a heavy loss in the last Wu-Tang battle. Now, only these brothers could be seen in public. He automatically ignored the several young ladies of the Jia family. He glanced at the elegant and dignified Li Wan. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. There was a graceful and beautiful Taoist nun standing beside her. Noticing his gaze, the Jia's mother explained, "This is immortal Miaoyu, a friend of your sister-in-law. Recently, there have been many things in the family, so we invited her to perform a ritual to protect the safety of the family." The people of the Rong and Ning mansions had always respected Buddha and Taoism. In addition, too many things had happened in the manor recently. It was not strange to invite one back. In addition, there were many women in the manor, so it was naturally impossible to invite a monk or a Taoist priest. However, Song Qingshu had never imagined that Miaoyu was actually her. If the Jia's mother knew that the living Buddha she invited back turned out to be a female devil who killed without blinking an eye in Jianghu, he wondered what kind of expression she would have. Noticing that Song Qingshu's eyes had been staring at her, Miaoyu subconsciously frowned. A trace of killing intent flashed in her eyes. Li Wan, who was beside her, hurriedly pulled her sleeve and whispered, "Sister, don't be impulsive." So this Miaoyu was the scarlet serpent deity, Li Macho. Why was she here? Brother AI, you're finally back. At this moment, a soft voice interrupted Song Qingshu's thoughts. He looked up and found a beautiful girl in red standing in front of him, smiling at him. Shi Shangyun. Speaking of which, she was also an old acquaintance. Looking at her lively eyes and full of smiles, there was no trace of the fear and trepidation she had in the beggar sect in the past. Presumably, after a long time, she had gradually walked out of the shadow. But what the hell was Brother AI? Could it be that she also had an affair with Jia Baoyu? Wasn't her fiancé Wei Rulin? "You little girl, you can't change your big tongue." The Jia's mother scolded her with a smile. She was born in the Shi family, so the way she looked at Shi Shangyun was especially affectionate. "Hello, Sister Yin." Song Qingshu finally realized that the other's pronunciation was not accurate. She had said second brother instead of Brother AI. "Sister Bao, didn't you miss him all this time? Why don't you say anything now that he's back?" Shi Shangyun blinked her eyes to the side. "Don't talk nonsense." Song Qingshu turned his head and saw a dignified and beautiful girl nodding at him with a blush. Her movements were especially ladylike and reserved. She did not look like she was in the Imperial City Department at all. Calm, Miaoshu House. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.